Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was a Marine Admiral and got married to Nico Robin? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Fox and the Archaeologist. The morning sun over the Grand Line was a merciless, brilliant thing. It spilled through the large, reinforced porthole of the Admiral's quarters, striping the polished wooden floor with bars of gold. For most on the sea, it was a signal to prepare for the day's unpredictable violence. For Marine Admiral Naruto Uzumaki, it was simply the light that illuminated the pages of the book his wife was reading. He lay on his side in their large, comfortable bed, propped up on one elbow. The white Admiral's coat, the one with the kanji for shinobi, Ren emblazoned on the back, was draped over a chair by the wall. In its place, he wore a simple black t-shirt and orange sleep pants. The only hint of his station was the sheer, coiled power in his frame, the dense muscle of a man who fought monsters for a living. His blonde hair was a chaotic mess, and his blue eyes, usually sharp enough to cut steel, were soft as they watched her. Nico Robin sat in an armchair near the window, a thick, leather-bound tome resting in her lap. She was already dressed for the day in a simple dark purple blouse and black trousers, her long black hair tied back loosely. A pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She was so engrossed, the only sign she knew he was awake was the faint, knowing smile that touched her lips. "You're staring, Admiral San," she murmured, not looking up. Her voice was a low, melodic hum that always managed to settle the storm inside him. "Can't help it," Naruto replied, his own voice a low, gravelly rumble. "It's a good view." She finally lifted her gaze, her own dark, intelligent eyes crinkling at the corners. "And here I thought you preferred sunrises over the ocean." There a close second, he swung his legs out of bed, stretching with a groan that made his spine pop. He ran a hand through his hair, failing to tame it. "What's the book today?" "More ancient kings with questionable burial rites." "Something of the sort," Robin said, closing the book and placing it on a small table beside her. The table was cluttered with her research materials, maps, journals, and carefully sketched rubbings from past expeditions. A pre-void century kingdom that supposedly built cities of living coral. The text claims they didn't use masons, but sea singers. Naruto grunted, heading towards the small galley kitchen attached to their quarters. He pulled 2 mugs from a cabinet. "Sounds like a headache." "Living coral sounds like it would complain a lot." "Oh, don't put the barracks there, it tickles." Robin let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was a sound he'd worked for years to draw out of her. A sound more precious to him than any medal the world government could ever pin on his chest. When he'd first met her, a haunted shadow on the run, he wasn't sure she even remembered how to laugh. Now, it was the music of their shared life. "You have a very practical way of looking at history, dear," she said. "Comes from having to punch it in the face sometimes," he said. Pouring hot water over tea leaves in one mug and a dark, rich coffee powder in his own. He brought the steaming tea to her, his large, calloused hand gentle as he offered it. She took it, her fingers brushing his. It was a simple, practiced gesture, a constant reaffirmation. They were an island of peace in a world of perpetual war. He was the indomitable force, the living typhoon of power. She was the quiet, unshakable anchor, the repository of a lost world's truths. To the world government, they were a dangerous, albeit necessary, anomaly. To each other, they were just Naruto and Robin. He leaned against the wall, sipping his coffee, watching her. "Find anything that'll get us in trouble?" he asked, a teasing glint in his eye. Her smile was wry. "Not yet, but the day is young." That was their life. He enforced the precarious peace of the seas, and she, under his protection, hunted for the truth the world had tried so hard to bury. He defied a direct order from the fleet admiral himself to bring her in years ago. He'd seen the same hunted look in her eyes that he'd once seen in his own reflection as a child in Konoha. The loneliness of being a demon. He'd faced down Kizaru and a dozen vice admirals. Not with threats, but with a simple, unshakable declaration: "She is under my protection. If you want her, you will go through me." No one had been stupid enough to try. His power wasn't a secret. They had married a year later, a quiet ceremony on the deck of his flagship, the Shinobi, witnessed only by his most trusted crew and an old, laughing monkey D. Garp, the man who had found a bewildered, chakra-wielding teenager in a crater and saw not a weapon, but a hero. The calm was shattered by a sharp, urgent knocking at their cabin door. Naruto didn't even flinch. He set his mug down, his entire posture shifting in a fraction of a second. The soft, relaxed husband was gone. In his place stood the Admiral, his eyes sharpened, his senses expanding, taking in the NT. Ship in a way no one else could quite understand. Enter, he commanded. The door opened to reveal a young man in a standard Marine officer's uniform. His face was pale, his expression grim. It was Commander Isao, Naruto's right hand and the Shinobi's executive officer. Admiral Uzumaki, sir, my apologies for the intrusion. Isao's eyes flickered to Robin for a barest moment with a respectful nod before returning to Naruto. We have an urgent dispatch from Marine headquarters. Priority Alpha. Naruto was already moving, grabbing his uniform. He didn't need to ask. Priority Alpha meant civilian lives were in immediate, catastrophic danger. Report. It's the island of Lyria in the New World, sir. It's under full-scale assault. The perpetrator is Gravehand, Garrus. Robin's head came up, her expression turning serious. The warlord who was stripped of his title 3 months ago. The one with the Paramesha-type devil fruit. The very same, ma'am, Isao confirmed. He's amassed a new fleet. Reports say he's making an example of Lyria for its role in supplying the Marines who took him down. He's not raiding. He's leveling the port city. Naruto finished buttoning his black shirt, his face a mask of cold fury. He hated bullies. He hated those who used their strength to crush the innocent. It was the one, unwavering line that defined his personal code of justice. What's the civilian situation? Trapped, sir, Isao said, his voice tight. Garrus's fleet has the harbor blockaded. His men are running rampant in the streets. The local Marine garrison was overwhelmed in the first hour. Naruto shrugged on his admiral's coat, the white fabric settling on his broad shoulders. The kanji for Shinobi seemed to pulse with a faint energy. Set a course for Lyria. Maximum speed. Tell the engine room to push the turbines until they scream. I don't care if they melt, just get us there. Aye, sir. Isao saluted sharply and was gone. Naruto turned back to Robin. She was already putting her book away, her expression calm and focused. She knew the drill. Lyria is a pre-treaty settlement, she said, her voice crisp and professional now. She was no longer just his wife, she was his chief intelligence officer and strategist. The main port is naturally fortified by a series of basalt columns. There are ancient sea caves running beneath the main plaza. They could be used for evacuation, but they are a maze. Only someone with a deep knowledge of the island's layout would be able to navigate them quickly. Someone like you, he asked, strapping his kunai holster to his thigh, a habit he'd never abandoned. I have the original surveyor's maps from the first world government expedition 400 years ago, she confirmed, pulling a rolled-up chart from a long metal tube in the corner. I'll have them ready, quote. He walked over to her, placing a hand on her cheek. His thumb traced her jawline. Stay on the ship for this one. Garrus is reckless. I don't want you anywhere near the fighting. She met his gaze, her own unwavering. I will be more useful on the ship, coordinating the evacuation through the comms. But Naruto, be careful. His file mentioned the Kaseki no Mi. The fossil fruit. Anything he touches with his bare hands is turned to brittle fossil, living or not. One touch takedown, Naruto mused, a dangerous grin spreading across his face. Good. Means I won't have to hold back as much. He leaned in and gave her a quick, hard kiss. It was full of promise and raw power. I'll be back for dinner. With that, he turned and strode out of the cabin, the white coat billowing behind him like the flag of a coming storm. The bridge of the Shinobi was a hive of controlled chaos. Officers relayed reports, helmsmen shouted coordinates, NTH. E-deck plates hummed with the strain of an engine pushed far beyond its intended limits. Naruto walked onto the command deck, and the entire atmosphere solidified. Every officer straightened, their focus sharpening. His presence was a tangible thing, a force of nature in its own right. Status report. He barked. ETA 30 minutes, Admiral. The navigator called out. We're cutting through a squall line to shave off time. Get my task force on the forward deck. Full combat gear. I'll brief them myself. Aye, sir. Naruto's personal unit, the Kitsune Task Force, was an anomaly within the marine structure. Handpicked by him, they were loyal to him first and the world government a distant second. He trusted them with his life, and they, in turn, revered him. He found them on the rain-slicked foredeck, the wind whipping at their coats. There were 3 of them, the core of his team. Kenji, the swordsman, was polishing the blade of his katana, a long, wickedly curved nodashi. He was a man of few words, with a topknot and the grim face of a ronin pulled from a different era. He'd been a bounty hunter with a code, and Naruto had offered him a better purpose. Aya, the sharpshooter, was checking the mechanisms of her custom-built Kairoseki-tipped rifle. Her red hair was tied in a tight ponytail, and her green eyes missed nothing. She had a mouth as sharp as her aim and had been a revolutionary on an island oppressed by a corrupt king before Naruto had recruited her. And Kato, the brawler. A massive fishman, a whale-shark type, whose skin was a tapestry of scars. He was cracking his knuckles, each pop like a pistol shot. He had been a slave in the Sabayati archipelago before Naruto had literally torn his explosive collar off with his bare hands. Boss, Kato rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. Heard we're crashing a party. Bravehand Garrus, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the wind. He's got Lyria by the throat. His fruit turns people to stone on contact. Don't let him touch you. So, keep our distance. Got it, Aya said, patting her rifle. He can't fossilize what he can't reach. Kenji, Naruto said, turning to the swordsman. You and Aya take the flanks. Cut off his officers. Sow chaos among their ranks. I want his command structure dismantled in the first 5 minutes. Kenji simply nodded, sheathing his sword with a soft click. The sound was more of an answer than any word could be. Kato, Naruto continued, you're with me. We're the hammer. We're going straight through the front door. Your job is crowd control. Keep Garrus's men off. Me while I deal with the harbor blockade. Just point me at the things you need broken. The fishman grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. One more thing, Naruto said, his tone dropping, becoming deadly serious. My first priority is civilian life. My clones will handle the evacuation. Robin will be your eyes from the shinobi, guiding them through the tunnels. Your job is to create a path for them. Justice doesn't mean a thing if we burn down a city to get one man. We save the people, then we punish the guilty. That is our way. Understood. Loud and clear, Admiral. They chorused, their loyalty absolute. Just then, the squall broke. Through the parting rain, they saw it. The island of Lyria, wreathed in smoke. The beautiful port city was a war zone. Cannonballs arced from the half-dozen pirate ships in the harbor, smashing into historic buildings. Screams echoed faintly across the water. Naruto's jaw tightened. He could feel their fear. He could sense the thousands of lives crying out. It was a faint thrum in the back of his mind, a product of the sage mode he had long since mastered. Helmsman. Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by his chakra so that the entire ship could hear him. Take us in. Ramming speed. The crew of the shinobi didn't question the order. They were used to their admiral's unorthodox, brutally effective tactics. The warship surged forward, its reinforced prow aimed like a spear at the center of the pirate blockade. The pirates saw them coming. Panic erupted on their decks. They trained their cannons on the charging marine vessel. Admiral, incoming volley. An officer yelled from the bridge. Naruto stood on the prow, feet planted, the wind tearing at his coat. He held up his right hand, palm facing the approaching ships. A swirling, violent sphere of blue energy began to form. A miniature hurricane of pure chakra spinning in his palm. It grew larger and larger, whining like a jet engine. Rasengan, he breathed. The pirate cannons fired. Do. Zen cannonballs screamed through the air. Naruto thrust his hand forward. Giant Rasengan. The sphere in his hand swelled to the size of a small house and shot forward. It didn't fly like a cannonball, it tore through the air, leaving a vortex in its wake. It met the cannonballs halfway. There wasn't just an explosion, it was an annihilation. The iron balls, the fire, the smoke, all of it was grow. ND into nothingness by the spiraling chakra. The giant Rasengan continued, unabated, and slammed into the water directly in front of the lead pirate ship. The ocean itself erupted. A waterspout of biblical proportions launched the ship into the air, flipping it end over end before it crashed back down, broken and sinking. The shockwave, a solid wall of force and water, blasted the other ships, masting two and sending the rest scattering in chaos. The blockade was broken. Now, Naruto roared. Before the shinobi had even slowed, he was moving. He leapt from the prow, a flash of white and orange against the smoke-filled sky. In midair, he made a cross-shaped hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The air filled with popping sounds. 1,000 Narutos bloomed into existence behind him, a veritable army descending upon the war-torn city. It was a sight that had broken the morale of entire pirate fleets. Evacuation teams, go. Combat teams, with me. The original Naruto commanded, his voice psychically linked to every one of his clones. Half the clones, a 500-strong force, bypassed the fighting entirely. They flowed into the streets like an orange river, forming human walls to shield civilians. Guiding them toward the sea caves Robin had identified. On board the shinobi, Robin's calm voice directed them through a dedicated Den Den Mushi channel, her encyclopedic knowledge of the ancient tunnels turning a death trap into a highway to safety. Take the third archway on the left, there's a collapsed wall but you can get through the fissure behind the old merchant's stall. The other 500 clones, along with Kato who had made a colossal leap from the ship, slammed into the pirate forces on the ground. It wasn't a battle, it was a cleansing. Rasengans flared in alleyways, clone chains tripped up charging brutes, and Kato's fishman karate sent shockwaves through the ground, shattering cobblestones and pirate formations alike. Meanwhile, Kenji and Aya had vanished, ghosts on the periphery. A pirate captain giving orders would suddenly collapse, a single, impossibly precise Kairoseki bullet hole in his shoulder. Another, a hulking brute with a giant axe, would find his weapon sliced in three before Kenji's silent form had even fully passed him. The original Naruto landed in the main plaza, the ground cracking under his feet. He ignored the lesser pirates, letting his clones and his team handle them. His senses, sharpened to a razor's edge by a constant, low-level hum of natural energy, were locked onto a single, malevolent presence. There, standing, before the steps of the governor's mansion, was Gravehand Garrus. He was a tall, gaunt man with sallow skin and dead eyes, dressed in tattered finery. He was watching the chaos with a detached amusement, one hand resting on the petrified statue of a marine captain. Admiral Kitsune, Garrus said, his voice a dry rasp. I was wondering when the government's pet monster would show up. Garrus, Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He walked forward slowly, each step heavy with intent. Your party's over. Surrender now, and I'll only break most of your bones. Garrus laughed, a horrible, grating sound. You think you can threaten me? I hold the power of ages in my hand. One touch is all it takes. He gestured to the plaza, where several of his men were fighting Naruto's clones. Your little tricks are amusing. But they are just that. Tricks. Naruto stopped about 20 feet away. He could feel the strange, dead energy radiating from the man's devil fruit. Robin was right. This was a dangerous power. Last chance, Naruto said. No, Garrus sneered. This is your last chance. He moved, faster than a man his size should. He lunged, his right hand outstretched, fingers aiming for Naruto's chest. The air around his hand seemed to warp, taking on a dusty, gray quality. Naruto didn't move back. He didn't dodge. He simply closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, faint orange pigment had appeared around his eyes. His pupils had become horizontal bars, like a toad's. The air around him grew heavy, charged with a vibrant, living energy that was the polar opposite of Garrus's dead power. Sage mode. Garrus's hand was inches from his chest. He could already imagine the Admiral turning to brittle, lifeless stone. A perfect trophy. But then, something impossible happened. Naruto didn't move, yet Garrus was sent flying backward as if hit by an invisible cannonball. He tumbled through the air, crashing into the stone steps of the mansion with enough force to shatter them. He coughed, spitting up blood, his mind reeling. What? I didn't even touch you. Naruto stood in the same spot, his hands in his pockets. You don't get it, he said, his voice now layered with an echo of natural power. Your power works on contact. But I don't need to touch you to hit you. He was using the frog kata, an extension of his own senses and the natural energy that permeated everything. He could strike with an aura of that energy, an invisible fist that Garrus's power was useless against. Garrus scrambled to his feet, a look of disbelief warring with fury on his face. A trick, some kind of shockwave. You can't beat me. He charged again, this time more erratically, swiping and lunging, trying to tag Naruto with his fossilizing touch. But it was like trying to catch smoke. Naruto weaved and ducked, his movements fluid and economical. He wasn't just dodging, he was sensing Garrus's intent before he even moved. To Garrus, it was like Naruto could see the future. Stand still and die, Garrus shrieked, his composure breaking. Not my style, Naruto said calmly. He saw his opening. Garrus overextended on a wide swipe. Naruto ducked under the man's arm, his own hand a blur. He didn't aim for the chest or head. He tapped Garrus lightly on the elbow and the knee of his outstretched arm and leg. Garrus froze, expecting the hit. But nothing happened. He blinked. Missed. Nope, Naruto said. He took a step back. A small, spiraling ball of chakra, no bigger than a marble, was spinning on Garrus's elbow and knee. It was a perfectly controlled, miniature Rasengan. Garrus's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was about to happen. Before he could even scream, Naruto clenched his fist. Udama Rasengan. The two small spheres erupted. They didn't explode outward, they imploded. Grinding with unimaginable force, the sound was a sickening crunch of bone and sinew. Garrus's arm and leg didn't just break, they were twisted into grotesque, mangled shapes. He collapsed, screaming, not in pain, but in sheer, abject agony. The fight was over. Naruto stood over him, the orange pigmentation fading from his eyes. His expression was cold, devoid of pity. I told you, he said. I'd break most of your bones. He turned away, leaving the former warlord writhing on the ground for Kato and the clones to secure. The plaza was nearly clear. The screams had been replaced by the organized shouts of his clones, directing the last of the civilians to safety. The fighting had lasted less than 15 minutes. The city was saved, its people alive. His justice was done. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the damaged but living city, Naruto found Robin. The main fighting was long over, his task force and clones were managing the cleanup and prisoner transport. He'd found her exactly where he knew she'd be, not in the safety of the governor's mansion, but in the oldest, most damaged section of the port. She was kneeling before a collapsed wall of an ancient customs house, a section that had been blasted open during the battle. She ran her gloved fingers over the exposed stones, her brow furrowed in concentration. Find something interesting, he asked, his voice back to its normal, warm tone. She looked up, a smudge of dust on her cheek. The blast revealed a hidden compartment. The foundation of this building is far older than the records suggest. It's not from the treaty period. This is Void Century era. Naruto's good mood evaporated. Anything to do with the Void Century was a red flag, a direct line to the world government's deepest paranoia. It was the entire reason Robin had been hunted for most of her life. What is it? He asked, kneeling beside her. She pointed into the dark cavity. There's a stone inside. It's not poneglyph material. It's basalt, but it's carved with the same ancient script. Her excitement was palpable, the pure, unadulterated joy of a scholar on the verge of a breakthrough. It was the look he loved most on her. I've never seen a poneglyph text on any other medium. It's a fragment, small, maybe a marker or a warning plaque. With delicate care, she used a brush to clear away more debris. Then angled a portable light into the hole. Inside, resting on a bed of dust, was a black, cube-shaped stone, no bigger than a man's head. Ancient, elegant characters were carved into its surface. Naruto stood guard, his senses on high alert, while Robin worked. Using a large sheet of paper and a piece of charcoal, she meticulously created a rubbing of the inscription. Her hands moved with a practiced, reverent grace. To him, it was just a strange language on an old rock. To her, it was a voice speaking from a silent abyss of 800 years. When she was done, she carefully rolled up the paper and slid it into her protective tube. She looked at him, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of academic thrill and a deep, unsettling curiosity. "This is unusual, Naruto," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The grammar is archaic, even for a poneglyph. It doesn't speak of weapons or history. It feels more like a prayer or a curse." Back in the quiet solitude of their cabin on the Shinobi, the world outside was peaceful again. The ship was sailing away from a grateful, recovering Lyria. The low hum of the engines was a comforting thrum. Robin had unrolled the rubbing on their large table. Naruto stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder as she translated the strange, blocky characters. "It's fragmented," she murmured, tracing the lines with her finger. "This part seems to be a title, a warning to those who would claim the next word is damaged, voiceless throne." Naruto frowned. Voiceless throne. Sounds like something one of those stuffy celestial dragons would sit on. "No," Robin said, shaking her head. "This feels different, colder." She moved her finger further down the page. "And this line, this is the part that's truly disturbing." She took a deep breath. "It says, 'Beware the king who consumes silence. For his hunger is the end of thought, the end of will, the end of the self.'" A chill, colder than any New World winter, seemed to settle in the room. A king who consumes silence. The end of will. It wasn't the language of conquest or politics. It was the language of cosmic horror. Robin looked up at him, and for the first time since the dark days before he'd found her, he saw a flicker of that old, hunted fear in her eyes. It was the fear of a truth so profound and so terrible that the world had killed her entire home just to keep it quiet. He squeezed her shoulder, his presence a solid, warm anchor in the sudden cold. He leaned down, his lips brushing her hair. "A king who eats silence," he said, his voice a low, resolute promise. "Let him try. He'll find it's a lot harder to chew than he thinks." She leaned back against him, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. He looked at the strange, ancient words on the paper. Then at the woman he loved. A new enemy, a new mystery, another shadow reaching for her from the past. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Whatever it is, Robin," he murmured into her hair. "We'll figure it out, together. I'm not letting anyone chase you ever again." She turned her head, her face buried in his chest, and nodded. Out on the dark ocean, the world was vast and full of monsters. But in here, they were safe. For now. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Justice. The 2 days it took to reach the waters of Marineford were a fragile piece. Shinobi cut through the calm seas of paradise, leaving the turbulent storms of the New World behind. On board, life settled into a familiar rhythm. The crew performed their duties with quiet efficiency. The Kitsune Task Force trained with a renewed intensity born from the Lyria conflict, and the prisoners, including a heavily sedated and bound Gravehand Garrus, were secured in the brig. In their quarters, Naruto and Robin fell back into their own routine. The rubbing of the strange basalt fragment lay on her research desk, a dark blot of ink on an otherwise orderly surface. Robin Cross-Reefer, NCED it with every scrap of lore she possessed, her mind a whirlwind of languages, dynasties, and forgotten epics. Naruto would often find her there, lost in thought, and would simply sit with her, leaning his kunai or sorting through mission reports, his silent presence a comforting shield against the heavy silence of the past she was communing with. "It's the syntax," she said one afternoon, looking up from a worn, priceless text. He was sitting on the floor, painstakingly re-wrapping the grip on one of his custom tri-pronged kunai. It's structured not as a statement of fact, but as an invocation. Like a ward against something. King who consumes silence isn't a title. It's a definition. A definition of what? Naruto asked, tying off the wrap with practiced neatness. "I don't know. It feels conceptual. Not a person. Not a weapon. Something else." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Whatever it is, the world government is terrified of it. They didn't just kill the scholars of Ohara for studying the Void Century. They were trying to erase a specific name, a specific idea. Maybe this one." The summons arrived via a screeching news coup, delivered by a Den Mushihu's Shell W. As carved with the sigil of the fleet admiral himself. It was a curt, Non-negotiable order. Admiral Kitsune was to report to Marineford headquarters immediately for debriefing on the Lyria incident. Alone. Naruto read the official transcript with a flat expression. Debriefing, he scoffed, tossing the paper onto the table. He means a lecture. Robin looked up, her research forgotten. The word, alone, hung in the air between them. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command meant to isolate him, to separate the Admiral from his most trusted advisor. Sakazuki, she asked. Who else? Naruto stood up, stretching. The easy calm of the past few days was gone, replaced by a familiar, weary tension. He's probably furious I didn't just sink the entire island to get Garrus. Thinks I'm setting a precedent by proving you can win without leveling a city. He's baiting you, Naruto. I know. He walked over to his closet and pulled out a fresh uniform. He wants me to lose my temper. Give him a reason to officially censure me. He's been trying for years. Then don't, she said simply, her gaze steady and full of trust. You are better than him. You don't need to prove it with anger. He paused, his back to her. He took a deep breath, the faint scent of old books and her perfume filling his senses. He turned, a small, genuine smile on his face. Yeah, I know. He walked to her, bent down, and kissed her forehead. Keep digging. Find out what this voiceless throne is. I have a feeling it's going to be more important than whatever yelling match I'm about to walk into. As the iconic, crescent-shaped bay of Marineford came into view, the atmosphere on the shinobi shifted. This was not a friendly port of call. This was the Lion's Den, the heart of the world government's military might. The fortress city was a monument to order and power, its towering pagodas and sprawling barracks a stark, institutional gray that seemed to leach the color from the sky. The very air felt different here, heavier, more disciplined, and utterly devoid of the freewheeling spirit that defined Naruto's own command. He stood on the bridge as his ship was guided into a designated dock, a space conspicuously surrounded by other, more conventional warships. Marines in perfect formation stood at attention on the pier, their faces impassive. They weren't an honor guard, they were a statement. Looks like they rolled out the red carpet. Aya muttered, standing a few paces behind him. Or the firing squad. Stay sharp, Naruto said, not taking his eyes off the fortress. They won't try anything, but they like to posture. He turned to Isao. Have the crew maintain readiness. No shore leave. I want us ready to depart the second I'm back. Admiral, Isao said, his face grim. Naruto strode down the gangplank alone, his white coat stark against the gray backdrop. His steps were measured and confident, echoing in the sudden silence. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. He could hear the whispers from the decks of other ships. It's him, Admiral Kitsune. The one they found in the crater. They say he doesn't have a devil fruit, that his power is something else. He was an outsider, a celebrity, and a monster. All in one. He ignored them all, his gaze fixed on the main citadel where he knew Fleet Admiral Akainu would be waiting. The journey to the Fleet Admiral's office was a walk through the very soul of absolute justice. The corridors were stark and utilitarian, polished to a mirror shine. The walls were adorned not with art, but with portraits of past Fleet Admirals, their gazes severe and judgmental. The air smelled of steel, salt, and sterile cleaning agents. Every Marine he passed snapped to perfect, rigid attention, their fear and respect a palpable force. He didn't knock. He pushed the massive, obsidian doors to Akainu's office open and walked in. The room was exactly as he remembered it, a volcanic cavern carved into the heart of the fortress. The air was hot and smelled of sulfur. A low, ominous glow emanated from cracks in the dark rock walls, as if the magma that fueled the Fleet Admiral's power was just beneath the surface. Sakazuki was not sitting behind his massive desk. He stood by a large window overlooking the bay, a thick cigar clenched in his teeth, his back to the door. And he wasn't alone. Ooh, look who it is, a lazy, drawn-out voice drawled. The hero of Lyria, Admiral Kizaru, Borsellino, was slouched in one of the visitors' chairs, his lanky frame draped in his signature yellow striped suit. He was polishing his sunglasses with a cloth, an infuriatingly vague smile on his face. Sitting in the other chair, looking profoundly uncomfortable in the oppressive heat, was former Fleet Admiral Sengoku, his pet goat calmly chewing on the hem of his robe. Sengoku-san. Kizaru. Naruto nodded to them before his eyes settled on the broad, magma-scarred back of the fleet admiral. You wanted to see me, Sakazuki. Akainu turned slowly. His face was a thundercloud. The right side of his body, from his neck down, was a tapestry of molten rock tattoos, a permanent reminder of his Logia power. His eyes burned with a fanatical, incandescent rage that never seemed to cool. Admiral Kitsune. Akainu's voice was a low growl, like rock grinding against rock. Your report on the Garrus incident was insufficient. I captured a rogue warlord, dismantled his pirate fleet, and saved the population of an entire island. Seemed sufficient to me, Naruto replied, his tone even. He refused to be intimidated. You left 3 of his ships afloat, Akainu bit out. Taking a step forward, the temperature in the room climbed several degrees. You allowed hundreds of pirates to be taken alive, and you utilized your clones for civilian evacuation instead of as a vanguard force to crush the enemy immediately. Your sentimentality is a disease, Naruto. It is a weakness that infects the very idea of justice. My sentimentality. Result. Ed in a total of 3 civilian casualties, all from the initial bombardment before we arrived, Naruto countered, his voice like ice. Your preferred method, a buster call, would have resulted in a death toll in the thousands. Tell me, Sakazuki, which of those outcomes serves justice better? Justice is the eradication of evil. Akainu roared, slamming a fist onto his desk. The wood didn't break, it smoldered, bursting into flames which he contemptuously ignored. Absolute and without compromise. By allowing those pirates to live, you give them the chance to escape, to kill again. You have prolonged the problem instead of solving it. And what about the problem of your association with the demon of Ohara? Kizaru chimed in, putting his sunglasses back on. He tilted his head. It's so strange. An admiral of the Marines, married to the world's most wanted criminal. The celestial dragons are very confused by it. It sends a mixed message, don't you think? Naruto's eyes narrowed. Nico Robin was pardoned. Her slate is clean. She is a civilian under my protection. Her past is irrelevant. Is it? Akainu sneered. She reads the poneglyphs. She consorts with the ghosts of the void century. That knowledge is a plague. And you are sheltering the carrier. Every day she is by your side, you undermine the authority of the world government and the very foundation of this world's peace. The foundation of this world seems pretty shaky if one woman reading a book can bring it down, Naruto shot back. Maybe the foundation is the problem, not her. Sengoku, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. His voice weary. That's enough, both of you. Naruto, your methods, while unorthodox, produced results. The world nobles may not like it, but the citizens of Lyria are hailing you as a savior. That has value. Sakazuki, your point is noted, but the matter is closed. Akainu looked like he wanted to argue, to physically melt the very room around them, but a sharp, piercing alarm suddenly blared through the citadel. It wasn't a drill, it was a high-level alert, one that signified a catastrophic loss. An officer burst into the room, his face ashen with terror, not even stopping to salute. Fleet Admiral, we've lost contact with the G5 base in the New World. G5 was the Marines' dumping ground for their most problematic, unruly, but effective soldiers. It was a fortress on the edge of pirate territory, infamous for its toughness. Lost contact, Akainu growled. Elaborate. It's gone, sir. The officer stammered. We just received a garbled transmission from a patrol ship in the vicinity. The entire island, the base, the town, everything, it's been silenced. Silenced? Kizaru asked, his lazy demeanor finally cracking with a sliver of curiosity. What a peculiar choice of words. The patrol found no bodies, sir. No rubble. Just. The island is dark. The fortress is intact, but it's covered in shadows. And everyone is gone. Thousands of Marines, gone. The final transmission from the base commander was just screaming. He kept screaming about a man who walked out of the dark. He called him Revenant. Naruto felt a cold pit form in his stomach. He saw Sengoku's face pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Just then, the heavy doors opened again. Monkey D. Garp stood there, clad in his usual white suit, a bag of rice crackers in his hand. He wasn't laughing. His face was as serious as Naruto had ever seen it. "Revenant," Garp said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He walked into the room, his presence immediately dominating the space in a way even Akainu's fury couldn't. He looked from Sengoku to Naruto. "So, it's him. He's back." Akainu rounded on him. "You know this man, Garp." "We all do," Sengoku said, his voice grim. He looked at Naruto. He was a vice admiral. One of the most promising we've ever had. A master of all 6 forms of Rokushiki, a brilliant tactician, and a user of the Kage no Mi. The shadow fruit, Kizaru mused. "I thought that belonged to the warlord Moria." "Moria stole it from his corpse," Garp said bluntly, crunching on a rice cracker with enough force to sound like a breaking bone. "Or what he thought was his corpse. The man's name is Kageyama. He served on a mission with you once, didn't he, Naruto?" Naruto's mind flashed back. Years ago, a joint operation to quell an uprising on a remote island. He'd been a new vice admiral then, eager and full of fire. Kageyama had been his senior officer. A man with a quiet, intense demeanor and a belief in justice so pure it was almost blinding. He remembered Kageyama taking a blow meant for him, standing over a group of saved civilian children, and saying, This is what we fight for. Nothing else matters." "Kageyama," Naruto breathed, the name feeling like ash in his mouth. "He died. His ship was destroyed during the purge of Flevance." "No," Sengoku corrected, his face etched with regret. "His ship was reported destroyed. Kageyama was from Flevance. He was off-world on that mission with you when the order came down. The world government declared the Amber Lead disease contagious and quarantined the island. They liquidated the entire population to contain the sickness. His family, his home, everything. The pieces clicked into place with sickening finality. The man who believed in protecting civilians above all else had his entire world erased by the very institution he served." "He didn't die," Garp said, his eyes hard as flint. "He went into hiding, and it looks like he spent the last decade getting strong. And getting angry. A traitor who uses the power of darkness," Akainu spat, his rage finding a new, tangible target. "He is an affront to justice. I will hunt him down and burn his very shadow from this world." Naruto was barely listening. The image of the righteous man he once knew was being overridden by the report from G5. A fortress of shadows. Thousands of Marines vanished. Revenant. A man who had returned from the dead to claim his vengeance. The meeting ended without resolution, overshadowed by the enormity of Kageyama's re-emergence. Naruto walked out of the oppressive heat of Akainu's office and back into the sterile corridors, his mind a maelstrom. This wasn't just another pirate. This was personal. He returned to the shinobi to find his task force waiting. The tension was evident on their faces. They'd heard the scuttlebutt that always ran rampant through Marineford. "Bad news, boss?" Kato asked, his usual boisterousness toned down. "The worst kind," Naruto said, walking past them toward the training deck. "The kind that used to be one of us." He stripped off his admiral's coat and dress shirt, leaving him in his black t-shirt. "Gear up, all of you. Let's spar." Aya raised an eyebrow. "Now, you look like you're about to punch a hole in the sky." "That's why we're sparring," Naruto said, turning to face them. "I need to clear my head. And you 3 have gotten sloppy." What followed was less of a spar and more of a controlled storm. It was Naruto against Kenji, Aya, and Kato simultaneously. He wanted them to push him, to force him to focus. The fight was a blur of motion. Kenji's blade, a whisper of steel, sought openings that didn't exist. Naruto would parry the edge with a chakra-coated kunai, the screech of metal on energy filling the air. "You're hesitating on the draw, Kenji. A fraction of a second too slow. A real fight, you'd be dead." Aya, perched on the ship's rigging, fired a volley of kairoseki-tipped rounds. They were meant to drain his energy, to weaken him. But Naruto, coated in a thin, barely visible layer of Kurama's chakra, simply let them impact. They sparked and fizzled against the golden energy, falling harmlessly to the deck. "Good grouping, Aya, but you're predictable. You're aiming for center mass. Go for the joints, the eyes. Be ruthless." Kato charged, a veritable mountain of muscle, aiming to grapple him, to crush him with sheer fishman strength. Naruto didn't meet his charge head-on. He flowed around it, tapping Kato on the shoulder. An instant later, a clone popped into existence behind the fishman, sweeping his legs out from under him. You're all power, Kato. Where's the finesse? Use your environment. Use your head, not just your fists. He moved between them, a whirlwind of instruction and correction, pushing them to their limits. He dodged, he parried, he countered, his movements a perfect fusion of elite shinobi training in New World hockey. He was venting his frustration, his anger at Kageyama, at Akainu. At the whole rotten system, but he was channeling it, turning it into a lesson for the people who depended on him. Finally, panting and sweating, they stood before him, battered but energized. That's better, Naruto said, breathing heavily. But not good enough. Kageyama is a former vice admiral who's had a decade to plan and train. He is not Garrus. He is strategic, he is powerful, and he is driven by a rage that burned his old self to ashes. When we face him, and we will, you need to be perfect. He left them on the training deck to nurse their bruises and absorb his lessons. He felt clearer, the fog of anger replaced by the cold clarity of purpose. He found Robin in their quarters, the rubbing of the basalt fragment now pinned to a large corkboard, surrounded by notes and diagrams. She looked up as he entered, taking in his disheveled state. A productive meeting with the fleet admiral, I take it? She asked, a hint of dry humor in her voice. You have no idea, he sighed, collapsing into the armchair she'd occupied that first morning. He ran a hand through his damp hair. Robin, we have a problem. He told her everything. About Kageyama, the man he once knew. About Flevance. About the G5 base. He laid it all out, the words tasting like poison. He wasn't just giving a report, he was unburdening himself. She listened patiently, her sharp mind absorbing every detail. When he was finished, she was silent for a long moment, her eyes on the fragment pinned to the board. A man whose entire world was unjustly destroyed by the system he swore to uphold, she said softly. A man with the power of shadows, who re-emerges as a revenant. He isn't just seeking revenge on the world government, Naruto. He's trying to become a new kind of justice. A dark reflection of the one that failed him. He slaughtered thousands of Marines at G5, Naruto said, his voice tight. There's no justice in that, isn't there? Robin countered, her question gentle but piercing. From his perspective, they were cogs in the machine that murdered his family. In his broken mind, it might be perfectly balanced. She walked over to him, kneeling before his chair. She took his large, calloused hands in her own. They were shaking slightly. You're afraid, she stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. He didn't deny it. I looked up to him, once. He was everything a Marine was supposed to be. Honorable, strong, protective. If a man like that can fall so far, what does that say about the rest of us? What does it say about the justice I'm fighting for? It says that your justice, your unwavering protective justice, is more important than ever, she said, her grip tightening on his hands. His faith was in the system. Your faith is in people. That is the difference, Naruto. That is why you will not fall like he did. Her words were a bomb, a lighthouse in his internal storm. He looked at her, at the unwavering belief in her eyes, a belief in him, and felt the foundations of his world settle back into place. And there's more, she said, her gaze flickering back to the board. The timing is too coincidental. A man with the power of shadows, a revenant, appears just as we find a text mentioning a voiceless throne, and a king who consumes silence. Darkness and silence. They are cousins, Naruto. I think your Kageyama isn't just on a rampage. I think he's looking for something. Something related to this. Far away, in the heart of the world, in the holiest of lands, 5 old men sat in a circle. The Pangaea Castle's chamber of the 5 elders was a place outside of time. Opulent and silent, they had received the same report as Akainu. Their faces, usually masks of calm, ancient authority, were etched with a deep, primal fear. Kageyama has returned, the bald, sword-wielding elder said, his voice a dry whisper. He was at Flevance. He knows the whispers. He knows what the Amber Lead was truly suppressing, said the tall, blonde elder, his hands steepled before him. He is not the true threat, a third, larger elder with a massive mustache stated. The threat is what he seeks. The keys, the poneglyphs, the 4th elder, the one with the spot on his forehead, clarified. He will hunt for the woman. The demon of Ohara. All eyes turned to the fifth and final elder, a man with long white hair and a look of profound weariness. For 800 years, we have maintained the balance. We have kept the lock sealed. We have paid the tithes. But Kageyama's rage is an unpredictable variable. He would burn the world down just to see what's inside the prison. He stood up, his robes rustling in the cavernous silence. He walked towards the center of the room, his gaze distant, as if looking at a horror only he could see. The king, who consumes silence, must not be allowed to wake. The sovereign of silence must not be stirred. The name, spoken aloud in this sacred room, seemed to suck the very warmth from the air. Kageyama's movements are too chaotic to predict, the swordsman said, but he will be drawn to the one person who can read the map. Nico Robin. The fifth elder stopped, his back to the others. Then the objective is clear. The woman cannot be allowed to fall into his hands. Nor can she be allowed to succeed in her own research. She is a key, and keys can be used to open doors that must forever remain shut. He turned, his eyes cold and hard as diamonds. Deploy Cypher Pol Igus 0. Their new commander is uniquely suited for this task. Have them shadow Admiral Kitsune's fleet. Observe the woman. If she comes close to the truth, or if Kageyama makes a move for her, eliminate the variable. He paused, letting the grim order settle. Eliminate Nico Robin. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Crossroads of Sabayati. The order came down 3 days after their departure from Marineford, catching the shinobi as it patrolled the volatile waters bordering the Red Line. It was a digital dispatch, flagged with Kizaru's specific command code. And its contents were so bafflingly mundane that Naruto initially thought it was a prank. Proceed to the Sabayati archipelago. Address rising rookie pirate activity and maintain a visible presence to deter lawlessness in the groves. Cooperation with local marine garrisons is advised. Naruto stared at the message on the communications console, a deep frown creasing his brow. Sabayati, he said aloud to no one in particular. They're sending a full admiral's fleet to deal with rookie pirates. Robin, who was sitting at a nearby chart table sketching the layout of an ancient ruin from memory, looked up. It's a make-work assignment, she analyzed, her voice calm and measured. Sakazuki can't officially punish you for Lyria, so he's benching you. Sabayati is a sideshow. It's busy, chaotic, and ultimately beneath an admiral's direct attention. He's trying to humiliate you. And Kizaru is the one who signed off on it, Naruto muttered, tapping a finger on the screen. That lazy bastard probably thought it was funny. He leaned back in his command chair, a grim smile touching his lips. Fine, if they want me to be a glorified meter maid, I'll be the best damn meter maid they've ever seen. He issued the orders. The shinobi and its 2 escort frigates changed course, heading for the colossal mangrove cluster that served as the final stop for pirates before they plunged into the New World. It was a place of dreams and despair, a nexus of slave traders, bounty hunters, pirates, marines, and the untouchable filth of the world, the celestial dragons. Naruto hated the place. It was a microcosm of everything wrong with the world, a glittering, bubble-coated monument to corruption and apathy. As they approached the archipelago, the unique vista of the Urukiman mangroves came into view. Dozens of massive trees, their roots so vast they formed the islands or groves, reached for the sky. A strange, sweet scent filled the air, a mix of resin and sea salt. Bubbles, secreted from the roots, floated lazily upwards, creating a surreal, dreamlike landscape. Naruto anchored his fleet in the channel just off Grove 44, the designated marine base area. He had no intention of setting foot on the island if he could help it. He'd let the local garrison handle the small fry pirates. His job was to be a deterrent, a monolithic symbol of the world government's power. He would do exactly that. And nothing more. For 2 days, they sat there. Naruto used the time to drill his crew relentlessly. He ran combat scenarios, disaster response exercises, and even had Robin give lectures on New World history and geography to his officers. It was productive, but the entire time, a low-level thrum of unease buzzed at the back of his mind. This was too quiet. A man like Kageyama, who had just wiped a major military base off the map, didn't just go to ground. He was planning something. Being stuck here, on babysitting duty, felt like being tied to a post while a wolf circled in the dark. The incident, when it happened, started not with a bang, but with a frantic, crackling call over the local marine comms channel. All units, all units. Disturbance at the human auctioning house on Grove 1. A celestial dragon has been struck. Repeat, a world noble has been assaulted. The bridge of the shinobi went dead silent. Every officer froze, their faces draining of color. Striking a celestial dragon was not a crime, it was an act of blasphemy against the gods of their world. It was an automatic trigger for the deployment of an admiral and a buster call. Naruto, Robin said, her voice low and urgent. She was standing beside his chair, her hand resting on the back of it. He was already on his feet, his eyes blazing. He had known, from the moment they arrived, that something like this would happen. The foul air of Sabayati was a breeding ground for such disasters. Who? He demanded into the comm. The voice that came back was panicked. Pirates, sir. The Straw Hat crew. Their captain, Monkey D. Luffy, Garp's grandson. Naruto's blood ran cold. He had met Luffy only once, years ago, when Garp had dragged him along for a visit to the East Blue. He remembered aloud, ridiculously honest kid with a rubber body and a smile as bright as the sun. A kid who declared he would be king of the pirates with the same certainty that Naruto had once declared he would be Hokage. Patch me through to Kizaru's office, Naruto ordered his comms officer. There was a protocol for this. As the admiral on site, he was the first responder, but another would be dispatched from Marineford immediately. Before the connection could be made, another, lazier voice cut through the channel, overriding the local frequency. No need for that, Naruto-kun. I'm already here. On the horizon, a single point of yellow light appeared, streaking across the sky at impossible speed. It resolved into the lanky form of Admiral Kizaru, who landed gently on the railing of the shinobi's bridge. Shimmering like a heat haze. A celestial dragon getting punched, Kizaru said, adjusting his sunglasses. I haven't seen this much excitement in years. It's so terrifying. He showed no terror at all. He looked bored. What are your orders, Kizaru? Naruto asked, his voice tight. My orders. Kizaru tilted his head. My orders are to go and exterminate the pests. A demonstration of overwhelming power is required. I'll turn that grove into a nice, glassy parking lot. You can stay here and watch. He gave Naruto a sly, knowing smile. He knew about Naruto's connection to Garp. He was twisting the knife. There are thousands of civilians in that grove, Naruto said, his fists clenching. Ooh, scary, Kizaru replied with a dismissive wave. He dissolved into a beam of light and shot towards Grove 1. Naruto watched him go, a storm of fury and conflict raging within him. He was a Marine Admiral. His duty was clear, but Garp's grandson, that stupid, grinning kid, he had punched a celestial dragon. An act of defiance so pure, so righteous in its recklessness, that a part of Naruto wanted to cheer. He looked at Robin. Her face was a mask of calm, but he could see the turmoil in her eyes. The Straw Hats were her friends. The only family she'd had before him. They had saved her, and now they were about to be annihilated. Damn it, Naruto growled. He turned to his XO. Isao, maintain position. Do not engage. That's a direct order, sir. Isao looked confused. Just do it. Before anyone could react, Naruto vanished in a blur of motion, a yellow flash of his own. He wasn't as fast as Kizaru's light, but with his body supercharged by chakra, he was close enough. He shot across the water, his feet barely touching the surface, and crossed the distance between groves in seconds. He arrived at the auction house to a scene of absolute pandemonium. The building was wrecked, panicked citizens were fleeing in every direction, and in the center of the chaos, Kizaru stood over the scattered, defeated forms of the Straw Hat Pirates. He had taken them apart with casual, terrifying ease. His foot was on Zoro's head, pinning the swordsman to the ground. His hand was raised, a brilliant point of light gathering at his fingertip, aimed directly at a defiant, wounded Monkey D. Luffy. The other Straw Hats were either unconscious or struggling to move. It's a shame, Kizaru was saying, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. Such promising young pirates. But you broke the world's biggest rule. Naruto's mind raced. He couldn't attack another admiral. That was treason. He couldn't let Kizaru kill Luffy and his crew. That was a betrayal of his own conscience, of Garp, and of the look in Robin's eyes. He needed a third option. A diversion. A spectacle so chaotic, so overwhelmingly powerful, that it would give them a window to escape. It had to be just plausible enough that he could claim it was an accident, a consequence of two admirals' powers clashing. "Yo, Kizaru!" Naruto shouted, his voice booming across the grove. Kizaru turned his head, his lazy smile not faltering. "Naruto-kun, I thought I told you to stay on your ship. Are you here to help with the cleanup?" "No," Naruto said, a wild, dangerous grin spreading across his face. "I'm here because you look bored. And I haven't had a good warm-up all week." He didn't wait for a reply. He made a hand sign. Sage art. Massive Rasengan barrage. 24 clones appeared around him. Each one formed a Rasengan, but these were different. Infused with natural energy, they glowed with a brilliant, sun-like intensity. "Hey, what are you?" Kizaru started to say, his eyes widening slightly behind his glasses. Naruto and his clones hurled the sage-powered Rasengans. But they weren't aimed at Kizaru. They were aimed around him. They slammed into the massive mangrove roots, the ground, the surrounding empty buildings. The explosions were catastrophic. Entire sections of the grove were vaporized. The ground heaved. One of the colossal roots, destabilized and half disintegrated, began to topple, threatening to crush a huge section of the commercial district. "Oops," Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. "Are you insane?" Kizaru yelled, for once dropping his lazy demeanor. He was forced to abandon the straw hats and transform into light, zipping into the air to avoid the cascading destruction. "You'll destroy the entire grove." "Just a little sparring accident," Naruto yelled back, creating more clones. "You know how it is when two guys at our level get carried away." He leapt into the air, meeting Kizaru in the sky. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to be as loud and destructive as possible. He formed a Rasenshuriken, its piercing shriek drawing all attention. Kizaru, seeing the vortex of wind blades that could shred matter at a molecular level, was forced to respond in kind, firing his Yasukani no Magatama, a torrent of light particles. The two attacks met in midair. The resulting explosion was blinding. A shockwave of light, wind, and force erupted outwards, shattering every window for 3 groves around. The sky itself seemed to crack. Down below, in the swirling chaos of dust and energy, an old man with wild white hair and round glasses suddenly appeared next to the fallen straw hats. Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King. He had been watching, waiting for an opportunity. "Now's your chance. Go," Rayleigh yelled, helping Luffy to his feet. But Luffy was staring up at the sky, at the maelstrom of golden light and orange energy. Who is that?" "An ally you didn't know you had," Rayleigh said grimly. "Now move." As the straw hats began to scatter, aided by Rayleigh who engaged Kizaru directly now that he was distracted, Robin was having a reunion of her own. During the initial blast, she had used her Hana Hana no Mi powers, sprouting an eye and an ear on a tree near the chaos. She saw her old friends, beaten but alive. She saw Luffy's indomitable spirit. A wave of profound emotion washed over her, relief, affection, and a pang of deep longing. A small Den Den Mushi, one she kept specially tuned to a frequency only the straw hats knew, buzzed in her pocket. She answered it. "Robin, is that you?" It was Nami's voice, frantic and filled with static. "What's happening? Who is that fighting the Admiral?" "It's a friend," Robin said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's buying you time. You have to run. All of you. Get off the island. Don't stop for anything." "But what about you, Robin? Are you okay? Will we see you again?" Robin looked out from the bridge of the shinobi towards the chaos on the horizon. She thought of her quiet life with Naruto, the peace she had found, the love she never thought she deserved. And she thought of the poneglyph fragment. The voiceless throne, the vast and terrible secret she was on the verge of uncovering. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that surprised even herself. "When this is all over. When I am truly free from all the ghosts of the past. We will meet again, I promise." She cut the connection, her heart aching but resolute. Back on the grove, the chaos was beginning to subside. Rayleigh was holding Kizaru off, their battle a flashing duel of light and hockey-infused steel. The Straw Hats had been scattered to the winds by the unexpected arrival of Bartholomew Kuma. The situation was contained, but the damage was immense. Naruto landed back on the ground, dispelling his clones. He'd done it. He'd created a plausible disaster. He was about to head back to his ship when a sudden, oppressive cold fell over the grove. It was a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It was a spiritual cold, a draining of light and life. The shadows, cast by the setting sun and the burning fires, began to writhe and stretch, coalescing into a single point. From that pool of absolute darkness, a figure emerged. It was a man dressed in a tattered, old-style Vice Admiral's coat, the fabric stained and dark. His face was gaunt, his eyes burning with a cold, fanatical light in the depths of their sockets. His presence radiated an aura of profound loss and unyielding hatred. It was Kageyama. Naruto froze. Kizaru, who had just disengaged from Rayleigh, also turned, his lazy posture gone, replaced by a tense readiness. Rayleigh himself took a step back, his hand tightening on his sword. This new arrival felt more dangerous than the two admirals combined. Revenant Kageyama, Kizaru said, his voice unusually sharp. To what do we owe the displeasure? Kageyama ignored him. His burning gaze was fixed on the ground, not on any of them, but on the massive, ancient root of the central mangrove tree. It's here. After all this time, he wasn't here for the Straw Hats. He wasn't here for the Celestial Dragon. The timing was a coincidence. He was here for something else entirely. Kageyama, Naruto called out, his voice ringing with a mixture of anger and a painful echo of old respect. What are you doing? What was G5 for? Kageyama finally looked at him. There was no recognition in his eyes. Only a deep, chilling pity. Ah, the government's pet shinobi. Still leashed, I see. Still wagging your tail for the masters who hold your chain. The men you killed at G5 were Marines. Your brothers in arms. They were prison guards, propping up a corrupt system, Kageyama said. His voice flat and devoid of emotion. Their deaths were a regrettable but necessary price for the liberation to come. A price I am more than willing to pay. He turned his attention back to the mangrove root. This tree has been drinking from the island's history for 1,000 years. It remembers. He placed a hand on the bark. The shadow beneath his palm deepened, spreading like ink. And I can make it talk. He was using his awakened devil fruit power. He wasn't just controlling his own shadow, he was communing with the shadows of all things, drawing out their memories, their history. I won't let you, Naruto said, settling into a low fighting stance. Sage mode flared to life, the orange pigment appearing around his eyes. Natural energy flooded his senses. You cannot stop what is already in motion, Kageyama said. His eyes widened slightly as information flowed into him from the tree's shadow. Yes, a piece of the puzzle. Hidden beneath the roots, an artifact of the D clan, a lodestone, to guide the way. He began to sink into his own shadow, preparing to teleport away. Oh no, you don't. Naruto moved, crossing the distance in an instant. He thrust his hand forward, not to strike Kageyama, but to grab him. Kageyama was faster. He raised his own hand, and a wall of solidified shadow, hard as steel, erupted from the ground between them. Naruto's fist slammed into it, the impact cracking the shadowy construct but stopping his advance. From the other side of the wall, Kageyama's voice echoed. You fight to protect a lie, Naruto. A beautiful, comfortable i.e. that you and your stolen archaeologist have built for yourselves. But the truth is coming. A truth that will drown this world in silence. He then fired a projectile of concentrated shadow through the wall. It wasn't aimed at Naruto. It was aimed at Kizaru. The Admiral, caught off guard by the sheer audacity, was forced to transform into light to avoid it. The bolt of darkness continued, striking the ground where the Straw Hat swordsman, Zoro, had been moments before. Consider that a freebie, Kageyama's voice taunted. A demonstration. The world government is your true enemy, not me. When you realize that, you will know where to find me. With that, his presence vanished. The oppressive cold receded, leaving behind only the smoke and the setting sun. He was gone, along with whatever artifact he had come for. Naruto stood amidst the wreckage, his fists clenched, his sage mode raging. He had succeeded in saving Luffy, but in doing so, he had allowed Kageyama to waltz in and take some thing of immense importance right under the noses of two admirals. He had created the perfect diversion, not just for the Straw Hats, but for his true enemy as well. Kizaru solidified, dusting off his suit. He looked at the devastation around them, at Naruto, and then in the direction Kageyama had vanished. For once, his smile was gone. "Well now," he said, his voice uncharacteristically grim. It has become a very complicated afternoon." Naruto didn't answer. He was staring at the hole in the shadow wall Kageyama had erected, the Revenant's final words echoing in his mind. "The world government is your true enemy. A truth that will drown this world in silence." He had come to Sabayati to be a glorified watchdog. He was leaving with a seed of terrifying doubt planted in his heart, and the chilling realization that the game had changed. This was no longer just about justice or revenge. It was a race for the truth, and Kageyama was already one step ahead. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Whispers from the Void. The voyage away from Sabayati was thick with a tense, oppressive silence. The archipelago, wreathed in the smoke of Naruto's spar, with Kizaru, receded behind them, a monument to a Mi. Seijin that had spiraled disastrously out of control. Naruto stood on the foredeck of the shinobi, the wind whipping his white coat, his mind a turbulent sea. He had successfully saved Garp's grandson and Robin's friends. But the cost was a gnawing uncertainty. Kageyama's words echoed in his head, a venomous whisper that coiled around the foundations of his loyalty. "The world government is your true enemy." His official report, co-signed by a surprisingly compliant Kizaru, was a masterpiece of half-truths and strategic omissions. It stated that in the process of apprehending the Straw Hat Pirates, Admiral Kitsune and Admiral Kizaru's conflicting devil fruit and energy-based abilities had caused significant, regrettable collateral damage, creating an opportunity for the pirates to be scattered by the warlord Bartholomew Kuma. The sudden appearance of the traitor Kageyama was framed as an opportunistic strike amidst the chaos. It was plausible enough to avoid a court-martial, but it was a lie. A lie that sat like a stone in Naruto's gut. He found Robin in their quarters, the ship's library. It wasn't just a room with books, it was the intellectual heart of the vessel. Floor to ceiling, shelves were packed with texts from every corner of the world, maps of seas that no longer existed, and scrolls of esoteric knowledge that would have gotten lesser scholars executed. Robin was standing before her corkboard, the rubbing of the Lyria fragment at its center. She had added a new drawing next to it, a rough sketch of Sabayati's main mangrove, with an X marking the spot where Kageyama had appeared. He called it a lodestone. Naruto said, his voice low as he entered the room. An artifact of the D clan. What does that mean? Robin turned, her expression as serious as he had ever seen it. I don't know for certain. The term, lodestone, implies guidance, something that points the way. If Kageyama is searching for the truth of the Void Century, he wouldn't be hunting for poneglyphs one by one. That's too slow, too random. He would be looking for a map. A key. She gestured to the board. We have the voiceless throne, and the king who consumes silence. Now we have a lodestone, connected to the D clan. These are not separate pieces of a puzzle, Naruto. They are all part of the same terrifying picture. Her eyes met his, and he saw the burning, unquenchable fire of the scholar within her. The world government has spent 800 years burying this picture. Kageyama is trying to unearth it. I need to beat him to it. How? Naruto asked. We're flying blind. Kageyama has a head start and a piece we don't. Not entirely blind, she said, a glint in her eye. She walked to a heavy, sea-worn chest in the corner of the room and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on velvet lining, were several carefully preserved log poses, but one was unlike the others. It was ancient, its glass casing yellowed with age, the needle made of a strange, dark, non-metallic material. Professor Clover, the head archaeologist on Ohara, spoke of a place, a myth among scholars, an island library that supposedly predates the world government itself, a repository for knowledge that was deemed too dangerous, too heretical for public consumption. He called it Aparna, the Isle of Tomes. Naruto looked at the strange log pose. And you think it's real? I think it has to be, Robin replied. The knowledge I seek isn't on any normal island. It would have been purged. It has to be somewhere hidden, somewhere protected by geography and legend. According to Clover, Aparna is located in the calm belt, perpetually shrouded by a stationary, unnatural storm system. It never appears on any modern chart. This log pose was his most treasured possession. He believed it pointed the way. The calm belt, the breeding ground of sea kings, a place where the wind never blew. A suicide run for any normal ship. The shinobi isn't a normal ship, Naruto said, his decision made in an instant. The doubt Kageyama had sown in him was a poison, and the only antidote was the truth. If Robin needed to go to the ends of the earth to find it, he would take her there. We have chakra-powered turbines. We don't need wind. He looked at her, his expression hardening with resolve. But if this place is as dangerous as you say, we're not going in loud. A small team. We go in fast and quiet. He paused. And we go in dark. He walked to the comms unit and gave a series of curt orders. He reported a critical engine malfunction to Marine HQ, a lie that would buy them days, maybe a week, of radio silence. He informed his crew that they were undertaking a high-risk, classified reconnaissance mission. He then plotted a course for the coordinates locked in Professor Clover's ancient log pose. He was taking a Marine Admiral's warship off the grid to hunt for a truth his employers had sworn to bury. It was a step from which there was no return. The journey to Aparna was an eerie descent into a forgotten world. As they entered the calm belt, the sea flattened into a vast, glassy plain. The familiar sound of wind in the rigging died, replaced by an unsettling stillness. The only sound was the hum of the shinobi's engines. Below the surface, colossal shadows moved, sea kings, creatures the size of mountains, their presence a constant, silent threat. They were drawn to the ship but seemed hesitant to attack, wary of the immense life energy radiating from Naruto, a beacon of power they couldn't comprehend. After 2 days of tense sailing, they saw it. A permanent, churning vortex of black clouds on the horizon, lit from within by flashes of silent lightning. It was a storm that didn't move, a wound in the sky. Aparna, Robin breathed, standing beside Naruto on the bridge. As they drew closer, the sheer unnaturalness of the phenomenon became apparent. The storm wasn't just weather, it felt like a barrier, a conscious entity. The ship can't get through that, Naruto said, his sage senses tingling with warning. The turbulence would tear us apart. He turned to his task force, who had assembled on the bridge. Kenji, Kato, you're with me and Robin. Aya, you have the con. EP the ship outside the storm's perimeter. If we're not back in 24 hours, or if you get any signal from Marine HQ that our cover is blown, you leave. That's an order. Aya nodded, her face grim but resolute. And if hostiles show up, hold them off for as long as you can, then run, Naruto said bluntly. Our lives aren't worth the ship. They used a small, high-speed assault skiff, its engine muffled, to make the final approach. As they entered the storm wall, the world became a maelstrom of wind and water. Kato, with his immense strength, wrestled with the helm, while Naruto stood at the prow. Using localized bursts of chakra, small, controlled wind releases, to deflect the worst of the currents and flying debris. It was like navigating through a liquid blender. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. They broke through the storm wall into the eye. The water here was placid, the air still and heavy, smelling of old paper and petrichor. In the center of the calm, circular sea was an island. It wasn't tropical, it was a single, massive spire of black rock that jutted from the ocean like a broken tooth. Carved into the rock itself, from sea level to the cloud-wreathed peak, was a city of impossible architecture. Balconies, archways, and staircases were etched directly into the stone, creating a vertical labyrinth that spiraled up into the sky. It was a library built on the scale of a mountain. Aparna. They docked the skiff in a hidden, water-level cave. The air inside was cool and silent. There were no people, no signs of life, but it was not abandoned. The stone floors were clean. The torches in their sconces were lit with a strange, cool, blue flame that gave off no heat or smoke. It's automated, Robin whispered in awe, running a hand over a perfectly smooth wall. Or magical. The whole island, it's a self-maintaining archive. Let's find what we came for before the welcome wagon shows up, Naruto said, his senses on high alert. The place was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. He felt watched. Robin led the way, with the fragment from Lyria as her guide. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors with an almost preternatural sense of direction. Library was a maze of soaring chambers, bridges spanning bottomless chasms, and spiral staircases that seemed to defy gravity. Every wall was a bookshelf, filled with scrolls, codices, and stone tablets. It was the history of the world, unedited and uncensored. For Robin, it was paradise. For Naruto, it was the most dangerous place on Earth. They finally reached their destination, a vast, circular chamber near the island's peak. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it, a single, massive book bound in what looked like dark, fossilized leather. The book was closed, held shut by a complex, multi-layered lock. The unspoken tone, Robin breathed, her eyes wide with reverence. Professor Clover's legend said it was the library's index, a catalog of its most forbidden knowledge. She's said to contain the true name of the great kingdom and the nature of its enemy. She approached it, her hands tracing the lock. It wasn't mechanical. It was a puzzle, a series of symbols that had to be pressed in the correct order. The symbols were from the same archaic script as the Lyria fragment. I can open it, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. It will take time, but the language, it's a key unto itself. Then get to it, Naruto said, turning his back to her and facing the chamber's grand entrance. He, Kenji, and Kato formed a protective triangle around her. We'll buy you all the time you need. Robin set to work, her mind wholly consumed by the ancient puzzle. Minutes stretched into an hour. The only sound was the faint whisper of her fingers on the lock and the steady, silent breathing of her guardians. Then Naruto felt it, a flicker, a distortion in the air at the far end of the chamber. It was so subtle that even his sage senses barely caught it. Contact, he said, his voice a low growl. From the shadows of the grand archway, they emerged. Not with a sound, not with a battle cry, but like ghosts peeling themselves away from the darkness. There were 5 of them, all clad in stark white suits, all wearing expressionless white masks. Cypher Pol Igus Zero, the personal assassins of the world nobles. But it was their leader who made Naruto's blood run cold. He was a tall man, also in a white suit, but he wore no mask. His face was unnervingly familiar, sharp, aristocratic features, blonde hair slicked back. But his eyes were a cold, dead blue. And they were fixed on Naruto with an expression of chilling amusement. He moved with an impossible, fluid grace, a speed that was almost familiar. It's been a long time, Naruto-senpai, the man said, his voice smooth and mocking. Naruto's mind reeled. He knew that face. He knew that voice. It was a ghost from his own past, from a world away. Soren, Naruto breathed, his fists clenching. You're supposed to be dead. Soren was a former shinobi of Konoha, a prodigy from a minor clan who had served in the Anbu Black Ops. He had been a contemporary of Naruto's, a rival known for his speed and his cruel, ambitious nature. He was reported killed during a mission just before the 4th Great Ninja War. Soren chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. I found a better opportunity. A world more appreciative of my talents. The Gorosei are far more generous employers than the Hokage ever was. He had been transported here too. But unlike Naruto, who was found by Garp, Soren must have been found by them. And they had weaponized him. What are you doing here, Soren? Naruto demanded. My orders are simple, Soren said, his cold eyes flicking to Robin, who was still frantically working on the lock, her back to them. I am to observe the archaeologist. But your presence here, actively helping her pry into things best left buried, that accelerates the timetable. My new orders are to retrieve the asset and eliminate the complication. He smiled thinly. That's you, senpai. You're the complication. Before the words had even finished leaving his mouth, the fight was on. The 4 masked CP0 agents blurred into motion, using a hyper-advanced version of Rokushiki's Soru. They were living phantoms. 2 went for Kenji and Kato. 2 went for Naruto. Kenji's sword became a silver whirlwind, parrying the finger pistol strikes that came from every direction. Kato roared, his massive fists creating shockwaves as he tried to land a blow on agents who moved like hummingbirds. Soren himself came for Naruto. He didn't use Soru. He used the body flicker technique, the true shinobi art of high-speed movement. He was a series of afterimages, AF. Flickering mirage armed with a Tonto blade that glowed with a faint, dark haki. Their clash was not a brawl, it was a battle of pure, unbelievable speed. The air cracked with their movements. Kunai met Tonto in a shower of sparks. It was Konoha's #1 unpredictable ninja versus the ANBU's ruthless elite, reborn on a new world stage. Soren was fast, disciplined, and utterly without mercy. He fought with the cold, efficient geometry of an assassin. "You've gotten slow, senpai," Soren taunted, his blade nicking Naruto's arm. "This world has made you soft. A wife, a comfortable life as a glorified guard dog. You've lost your edge." Quote, "I found something worth protecting." Naruto roared back, his anger flaring. He slammed his palm onto the floor. The stone erupted, and a dozen shadow clones burst forth, swarming Soren. Soren just laughed. He moved through them like a phantom, his Tonto a blur. In seconds, all the clones had been dispelled with single, precise strikes. "Your old tricks won't work. I have haki now, I can see the real you." He was right. This wasn't a battle Naruto could win with raw power. This was a battle of skill. Meanwhile, Robin was close. The symbols were aligning. The lock gave a heavy, grinding click. Then another. Her heart hammered in her chest. She could hear the battle raging behind her, the sounds of her husband, her friends, fighting for her life. She forced it all out, focusing only on the task. "Got it," she cried as the final tumbler fell into place. The massive book clicked open. At that exact moment, Soren saw his chance. Naruto was momentarily distracted by Robin's cry. Soren flickered, bypassing Naruto's guard and appearing directly behind Robin, his Tonto aimed at her neck. "Time's up, archaeologist," he hissed. Naruto's head snapped around. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the blade, inches from Robin's throat. He wouldn't make it in time. But he didn't have to. From the pages of the open book, a wave of pure, silent energy pulsed outward. It wasn't an attack, it was a presence, a will. The blue flames in the chamber flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint glow emanating from the book itself. Soren froze. His body went rigid, his eyes wide with a confusion that quickly turned to terror. He looked down at his hands. He was still holding his blade, but he couldn't move. It wasn't paralysis. It was a lack of instruction. His brain was telling his muscles to strike, but the signal wasn't arriving. His will to act had been scooped out. The other CP0 agents faltered, their hyperspeed movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Kato seized the opportunity, landing a crushing blow that sent one agent flying into a stone pillar. Kenji, in turn, disarmed the other. "What is this?" Soren choked out, his voice strained. "What's happening?" Robin was staring at the open book. The pages were blank, all of them. There was no text, no index. Just empty, yellowed pages that radiated a profound and terrifying emptiness. "It's not an index," she whispered, a horrifying realization dawning on her. "It's a cage, a prison made of paper and ink. And we just opened the door." The will-devouring energy intensified. Naruto, protected by the vibrant life force of his own sage mode and Kurama's chakra, could feel it pressing in, a psychic void trying to leech away his intent. He could fight it, but it was exhausting. Like trying to shout in a vacuum. He had to end this. Now, he left Soren, who was still struggling against the invisible force, and turned to Robin. "Robin, we have to go. Close the book." "I can't," she cried, her own movements slow. The energy was affecting her too, though her sheer force of will, honed by decades of survival, was putting up a fierce resistance. "It won't close." They were trapped. The assassins were momentarily neutralized, but the chamber itself had become a weapon. And whatever they had just partially released was growing stronger. It was in the moment of desperation that Naruto and Robin had their most vulnerable, most honest exchange. Locked in a chamber with assassins and a cosmic horror, their eyes met across the room. Fear, love, and a desperate, unspoken trust flowed between them. He saw her terror, not for herself, but for the knowledge she may have just unleashed. She saw his resolve, his unwavering promise to protect her, no matter the cost. "The Sovereign," she mouthed, the name from the Lyria fragment finally clicking into place. This was it, the king who consumes silence. This book was one of its seals. Naruto's mind raced, connecting the dots. Kageyama's search for a lodestone. This library. This book. The world government's manic obsession with secrecy. It all revolved around this thing. The world government wasn't formed to lead, Robin said. Her voice strained but clear, giving voice to the thought that had just crystallized in her mind. It was formed to imprison. The D-Clan. They weren't enemies. They were the original jailers. Soren, overhearing this, let out a choked, incredulous laugh. Jailers. What are you talking about? Naruto didn't have time for this. He looked at the open book, at the wave of silent dread pouring from it. He couldn't destroy it. He couldn't close it, so he had to contain it. He made a rapid series of hand signs, the most complex he knew. Sealing Jutsu. 4 symbols seal. It was a variant of the seal his own father had used to seal Kurama inside him. A powerful, spiraling vortex of chakra appeared on his palm. He slammed his hand down not on the book, but on the pedestal it rested on. Black ink-like symbols spread from his palm, covering the pedestal and crawling up the book, forcing it shut. It was a desperate, makeshift solution, a powerful cage placed around a smaller one. The book slammed closed, and the oppressive, will-draining energy vanished as if it had never been there. The blue flames in the chamber reignited. The sudden return of their own volition was jarring. Soren stumbled back, gasping, his face pale with sweat. He looked at the sealed book, then at Naruto, a new, genuine fear in his eyes. He had felt his own will being erased. He had touched the void. What in the hells was that? He whispered. That, Naruto said, his voice grim and heavy with the weight of their discovery, is what your masters are so afraid of. Soren stared at him, then at Robin. His mission was to retrieve her. But he was a pragmatist. An opportunist. He had just witnessed a power far beyond any devil fruit or haki. A power that the Gorosei themselves were clearly terrified of. And he had seen Naruto, his old rival, control it. He made a split-second decision. He flickered, appearing next to his 2 conscious agents. The mission has changed, he declared. His voice once again cold and commanding. We are retreating. The island is compromised. Without another word, they vanished, melting back into the shadows they'd come from. They were leaving, not because they were defeated, but because the stakes had just become infinitely higher than they had been prepared for. Naruto, Kenji, and Kato stood panting in the silent chamber. The unspoken tome sat on its pedestal, now covered in the swirling black formula of Naruto's seal. They were alive, they were alone, but they were not victorious. They had found the truth, and it was a thous. And times worse than they could have imagined. An ancient, conceptual entity. A prison, a secret, a world held hostage not by tyranny, but by fear. And Kageyama, with his lodestone, was now hunting for the other locks. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Revenant's Gambit. The journey back from Aparna was a stark contrast to the voyage out. The silence on the shinobi was no longer tense, it was heavy, suffocated by the sheer, world-shattering weight of their discovery. The sovereign of silence. A being, an entity, a concept that consumed will. The world government wasn't a government, it was a glorified prison administration. And the Gorosei were its wardens. The Void Century wasn't a forgotten history, it was a redacted instruction manual on how to keep a cosmic horror locked away. Naruto stood on the bridge, staring out at the endless blue of the calm belt, but his mind was in the dark, silent library. He had felt the sovereign's touch, a chilling void that tried to unmake his very intent to exist. Only the fierce, defiant life energy of Sage Mode, combined with the raw, primal power of Kurama raging within him, had kept him whole. Robin, though not a censor, had felt it too, a psychic pressure that threatened to snuff out the brilliant flame of her intellect. She was in their quarters now, not researching, but staring at a blank wall. The information she had gleaned was too vast, too terrible, to be contained on a corkboard. It was a truth that rewrote the entire world. The D-Clan, she had whispered to him when they were back on the ship, her voice hollow. They were the ones who built the prison. The poneglyphs aren't just history. They're warnings. They're maintenance logs. They're the schematics for the cage. She had looked at him, her eyes dark with a terrible understanding. And what does every prisoner want, Naruto? Freedom. What if the will of D isn't about inheritance or destiny, but about a duty? The duty to keep the prisoner locked up. A duty that has been forgotten. The implications were staggering. Was Luffy, was Garp, was every D in the world an unwitting descendant of these ancient jailers? Naruto's personal Den Den Mushi, the one tuned only to Garp's frequency, began to ring. Its croaking call shattering the quiet. He answered, his gut twisting. He hadn't spoken to the old man since before Sabayati. Naruto. Garp's voice came through, devoid of its usual booming laughter. It was strained, tired. Where the hell are you? Your ship's transponder has been dark for a week. Engine trouble. Ji-chan. Naruto lied, the falsehood tasting like ash. We're sorting it out. Cut the crap, Garp snapped. I know you. You only go dark when you're somewhere you shouldn't be. Does this have to do with that archaeologist wife of yours? It has to do with everything, Naruto said. His voice grim. Kageyama. He's not just on a revenge kick. He's hunting for something. There was a pause on the other end. I know, Garp said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He just made his next move. And it's a big one. He's hit Impel down. Naruto felt his blood run cold. The great underwater prison. The most secure facility in the world. To free the prisoners. To build an army. No, Garp said, and the word was heavy with dread. Worse. He's not letting anyone out. He's killing them. He's targeted level 5, the freezing hell. He and his fleet punching a hole straight through the prison, straight to the lowest level. Magellan is trying to hold them off, but Kageyama's forces are fanatical. They're fighting like men who have already died. Naruto's mind raced, connecting Robin's theories to Kageyama's actions. The prison itself, Ji-chan, is it built on something? Garp was silent for a long, heavy moment. When he spoke again, his voice was laced with a deep, ancient weariness that Naruto had never heard before. Some secrets are secrets for a reason, kid. Some doors should never be opened. It's too late for that. Naruto growled, his patience snapping. We've already opened one. We know about the Sovereign. We know about the prison. What is at the bottom of Impel Down? He heard Garp take a sharp, ragged breath. The old man knew. He had always known. The prison is built on one of the 3 great anchors, Garp finally admitted, his voice barely audible. Ancient structures from the Void Century. They don't just hold the building to the seafloor. They anchor the very fabric of reality, reinforcing the Sovereign's seal across the globe. If Kageyama destroys it, he'll start a chain reaction, Naruto finished, a wave of cold dread washing over him. The other seals will weaken. The prison will begin to fail. He's not just trying to open the cage, Naruto, Garp said, his voice grim. He's trying to smash it to pieces. He's at Impel Down right now. Sakazuki is mobilizing a fleet, but he'll be too late. You're closer. You have to be. The line went dead. Naruto stood motionless for a second, the magnitude of the crisis crashing down on him. This was it. The endgame was starting. He slammed his fist on the console. All hands, battle stations. Isao, get me a course to Impel Down, and don't spare the engines. I want every weapon on this ship hot and ready to fire on my command. The shinobi roared to life. The quiet, contemplative atmosphere was shattered, replaced by the urgent, controlled chaos of a warship preparing for battle. Alarms blared, and Marines scrambled to their posts. The ship surged forward, its chakra-fueled turbines leaving a brilliant blue wake on the placid surface of the CA.LM belt as it raced towards the nearest gate of justice. As they sailed, Naruto gathered his core team, Robin, Kenji, Kato, and Aya, in the war room. He laid it all out. The Sovereign, the prison, the anchors, and Kageyama's insane apocalyptic plan. He didn't hold back. They had a right to know what they were about to fight and die for. They took it in silence, their faces grim. They were soldiers and a scholar. Used to the madness of the Grand Line, but this was different. This was a truth that unmade their reality. So the world government, the celestial dragons, they're all just guards. Kato rumbled, the concept struggling to fit into his straightforward worldview. Tyrannical, corrupt, and monstrous guards, Robin clarified, her voice sharp as glass. Who have committed untold atrocities to keep their secret. They are not the good guys here. But Kageyama's solution, Unleashing an entity that consumes consciousness, that is not a solution. It's annihilation. So we're not fighting for the Marines, Kenji stated, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. We're not fighting for the government. What are we fighting for? Naruto looked at each of them, his gaze hard and unwavering. We're fighting for everyone else. For the billions of people who have no idea that their world is built on top of a cage. We're fighting for the right to exist, to think, to be. We are the line. Nobody else is coming. His words hung in the air, simple, stark, and absolute. It was no longer about justice, loyalty, or ideology. It was about survival. They arrived at Impel Down to find a vision of hell. The waters around the massive underwater fortress were a churning battlefield. Kageyama's fleet, a collection of stolen marine vessels and pirate ships painted in grim, ashen colors, the Ashen Fleet, was locked in a brutal, close-quarters naval battle with the prison's defenses. Cannonballs tore through the air, explosions rocked the sea, and the screams of the dying were a constant, horrifying chorus. But the true horror was Kageyama's personal vessel, a massive, dreadnought-class ship that was physically fused to the side of Impel Down. It had rammed the prison, using its reinfork. Ed proud to tear a gaping hole in the upper levels. Kageyama's fanatics were pouring into the breach, a tide of black-clad soldiers fighting with suicidal ferocity against the prison guards and the monstrous jailer beasts. "Aya, you have command of the fleet," Naruto ordered, his eyes scanning the battlefield with tactical coldness. "Your priority is to engage the Ashen Fleet. Draw their fire. Cripple their ships. Don't sink them unless you have to. We need to take prisoners for intel. Keep them off my back." "And you, boss?" Aya asked, her knuckles white as she gripped her rifle. "Me, Kenji, and Kato are going in," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the breach. "Magellan can't handle this alone. We're going straight to the bottom." He didn't wait for an answer. He made a single hand sign, and the air around him shimmered. He was coated in a blazing, golden aura of chakra, 9 tomo marks arranged in a circle on his back, his hair spiking up. Kurama chakra mode. He was a miniature sun, a being of pure, overwhelming power. The crew on the bridge shielded their eyes, the sheer energy he was emitting was so intense. "Let's go," he roared. He, Kenji, and Kato leapt from the deck of the shinobi. Kenji and Kato landed on a large, floating chunk of debris. Naruto grabbed it with 2 massive arms made of golden chakra and hurled it like a missile towards the breach and Impel Down. They crashed through the opening into level 4, the blazing hell. The heat was immense, a shimmering, oppressive wave. The level was a war zone. Kageyama's soldiers, armed with advanced weaponry and a chilling disregard for their own lives, were pushing back the guards led by the formidable Vice Warden Hannibal. "Admiral Kitsune," Hannibal cried, his face a mixture of shock and relief. "What are you?" "No time," Naruto yelled, not even slowing down. "We're going to level 6. Hold the line here." They bypassed the fighting, a golden comet streaking through the fiery landscape. They ran past boiling pools of blood and down staircases littered with the dead. The prison's gruesome hierarchy unfolded as they descended. Level 5, the freezing hell, was even worse. The bodies of prisoners and guards alike were frozen solid, caught in macabre poses. Kageyama's forces had carved a path of absolute destruction, not even slowing to fight, their objective clear. It was on the staircase leading down to level 6, the eternal hell, that they finally met resistance. A wall of living shadow rose to block their path, and from it stepped Kageyama's elite guard. One was a massive man whose arms were replaced with shadow cannons. Another was a lithe woman who wielded whips of pure darkness. "Kato, Kenji, keep them busy," Naruto commanded. He didn't stop. He formed a Rasengan in his hand and leapt, using the wall of fighters as a springboard. He burst through the ceiling of shadow and continued his descent alone, leaving his 2 loyal men to engage in a desperate battle. He landed in the desolate silence of level 6. This was where the worst of the worst were kept, prisoners so dangerous their very existence had been erased from public record. But the cells were empty. The prisoners hadn't been freed. They were dead. Each cell contained a corpse, their bodies drained of all color, their faces masks of silent terror. They hadn't been killed by any conventional weapon. Kageyama had simply taken their shadows. And with their shadows, their lives. In the center of the vast, circular chamber stood Kageyama. He was not alone. He stood before a colossal, glyph-covered stone monolith that plunged down into the very bedrock of the seafloor, the great anchor. Its surface pulsed with a faint, ancient energy. Standing between Naruto and Kageyama was the warden of Impel Down, Magellan. The man was on his knees, breathing heavily. His body covered in bruises and cuts. His poison-based attacks were useless against a man who could simply retreat into his own intangible shadow. "You're too late, Kitsune," Kageyama said, his voice echoing in the dead silence. He held a hand over the surface of the anchor, and a vortex of shadow was pouring from his palm, eating away at the ancient stone, causing the glyphs to flicker and die. "This anchor is a masterpiece of void century engineering. It doesn't just reinforce the seal. It harmonizes it. By overloading it with my own power, with this concentrated darkness, I'm not just breaking it. I'm turning it into a disease. The disharmony will spread through the other anchors like a plague. Stop this, Kageyama," Naruto yelled, his golden aura blazing. "You don't know what you're unleashing. I've seen it. It will consume everyone, including you." Kageyama finally turned to face him, a look of profound, sorrowful pity on his gaunt face. "You still don't understand. You serve a system that chose to sacrifice my home, my family, my entire world, as a tithe, to keep that thing quiet." Naruto froze. "A tithe, yes," Kageyama said, a bitter, broken laugh escaping his lips. "Flevance. The amber lead disease wasn't a disease. It was a slow poison, leaked into the earth by a decaying seal fragment directly beneath the city. The Gorosei knew. They knew for 100 years. They let it happen. They let my people die, generation after generation, because the slow drain of life force, of will, kept the sovereign fed. It kept it dormant. My home was a sacrifice. A meal offered to a sleeping god." The revelation hit Naruto like a physical blow. The sheer, calculated monstrosity of it was beyond comprehension. The world government hadn't just covered up a secret. They had actively, knowingly sacrificed millions of their own citizens. "They are monsters," Kageyama whispered, his voice cracking with a decade of grief and rage. "They call my justice cruel. Theirs is a quiet, bureaucratic genocide. I will not let it stand. I will wake the sovereign. I will force it into a physical form. And then, with the power I have gathered, I will kill it. I will rip the cancer out of this world, even if it means killing the patient to do it." The conviction in his voice was absolute. He wasn't insane. He was a man who had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had given him a purpose. For the first time, a sliver of doubt, a terrifying, poisonous sliver, entered Naruto's heart. Was Kageyama right? No, he couldn't be. The risk was too great. The cost was too high. Your grief doesn't give you the right to gamble with the entire world. Naruto roared, shaking off the doubt. He charged. The battle that followed was a clash of absolutes. Light against dark. Hope against despair. Naruto, in his Kurama form, was a living sun, his speed and power overwhelming. He moved like a golden blur, each punch carrying the force of a meteor. But fighting Kageyama was like fighting a living shadow. Naruto would land a devastating blow, only for Kageyama to dissolve into an intangible pool of darkness, reforming a dozen feet away. Kageyama's shadows lashed out, not as physical strikes, but as tendrils of cold that sought to drain Naruto's energy, to sap his will. It was a battle of attrition. "You cannot defeat me here, Naruto," Kageyama taunted, his form flickering. "This prison is a fortress of despair. Every shadow here is steeped in a century of misery. I am at my strongest." He raised his hands, and the shadows of every dead prisoner in level 6 rose up. An army of silent, soulless specters swarmed Naruto, their touch icy and draining. Naruto roared, unleashing a wave of chakra that vaporized the closest shades, but more kept coming. He was being overwhelmed. Kageyama wasn't fighting him. He was using the prison itself as a weapon. And all the while, the anchor behind Kageyama was cracking. The glyphs were failing. A deep, resonant hum, a sound that felt wrong on a fundamental level, began to emanate from the stone. Naruto knew he couldn't win this way. He couldn't outlast him. He needed to end it in one blow. He held out his hand, and a black, swirling shuriken of pure wind and chakra formed, the Rasen Shuriken. But he didn't stop there. He poured more and more of Kurama's power into it, the golden aura around him flaring violently. The blade grew. its shriek becoming a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the prison. Sage Art. Tailed Beast Recentrican. It was a weapon capable of leveling a mountain. Kageyama's eyes widened. He knew he could not dodge or absorb that much concentrated energy. He had to meet it. He plunged both hands into his own shadow, drawing upon every ounce of his power, every specter of despair and impelled down. The darkness around him condensed, solidifying into a massive, snarling beast of pure shadow, a manifestation of his awakened power. Shadow God. Asura's Lament. He screamed. Naruto threw the Recentrican. Kageyama's shadow beast lunged to meet it. The impact was not an explosion. It was a cancellation. Light and dark, creation and entropy, collided in a silent, violent eruption of pure power. The very fabric of the chamber seemed to tear. For a single, blinding moment, there was only white light and black void. When reality reasserted itself, Naruto was on one knee, panting. His Kurama cloak flickering. The attack had taken almost everything he had. Across the chamber, Kageyama was in a similar state, his shadow form unstable, his breath ragged. But the attack had achieved one thing. It had blown Kageyama away from the anchor. The reprieve was short-lived. With a final, deafening crack, the great anchor shattered. The hum of wrongness ceased, replaced by a profound, terrifying silence that seemed to spread outwards from the broken stone, a ripple in the pond of reality. Kageyama looked at the broken anchor, and a grim, triumphant smile touched his lips. "It is done," he whispered. He had succeeded. He sank into the floor, his shadow swallowing him before Naruto could recover enough to stop him. He was gone. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He had failed. He had lost. He stared at the shattered remains of the anchor, and he could feel it. A subtle shift in the world. A loosening. A weakening. The first link in the chain had been broken. The Sovereign was stirring in its sleep. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Unholy Alliance. The aftermath of Impel Down was a gaping, silent wound. Kageyama was gone. The anchor was shattered, and in its place, a subtle but undeniable wrongness began to bleed into the world. Naruto felt it first as a Marine Admiral, a protector of the world's order. The reports started as trickles, then became a flood. Strange occurrences from isolated islands in the New World and even the far-flung corners of the Four Blues. A fishing village in the North Blue where the entire population was found standing on the docks, staring blankly at the sea, unresponsive, their eyes vacant. A mountain monastery in the Grand Line that had gone silent. When a marine patrol investigated, they found the monks sitting in mid-meditation. Unbreathing but not dead, like living statues. There were no signs of struggle, no disease, no poison. Just a quiet, creeping emptiness. They called it the silence. Naruto sat in the war room of the shinobi, the chamber dark save for the glow of a single map projection. The locations of the incidents were marked with cold, blue lights. They were scattered, seemingly random, but to Naruto, they formed a terrifying pattern. They were all in places of low population density, places of quiet contemplation or desolate isolation. The Sovereign wasn't attacking. It was waking up, stretching. And its passive aura was seeping through the weakened seals, consuming the will of those in the quietest, most vulnerable corners of the world. He felt a cold, creeping dread. This was his failure. He had faced Kageyama and lost. Now, the consequences were rippling across the globe. Robin entered the room, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. She placed it beside him. Her face was pale. Her eyes held the dark weight of sleepless nights spent poring over her research, trying to find a counter-solution to a problem that shouldn't exist. "The pattern is accelerating," she said, her voice low. "The incidents are becoming more frequent, the geographic spread wider. The anchor's destruction didn't just weaken the seal, it seems to have given the Sovereign a taste of the outside world. It's learning. It's growing bolder. The Gorosei must know what's happening," Naruto said, his voice rough. "They have to be panicking." "They are," Robin affirmed, her expression grim. She slid a datapad across the table. It displayed a highly encrypted marine communication she had intercepted through back channels she had cultivated over years of hiding. It was a cation between the 5 elders and Fleet Admiral Akainu. "They've authorized the final sanction. They're preparing to activate Uranus." Naruto's head snapped up. Uranus. One of the three ancient weapons, spoken of only in whispers. Unlike Poseidon, the power to command sea kings, or Pluton, a warship of unimaginable destructive power, the nature of Uranus was the most closely guarded secret of all. What is it? He asked. Based on fragmented texts, it's not a conventional weapon, Robin explained, her finger tracing patterns on the screen. It doesn't fire cannonballs or energy beams. The Ohlers of O'Hara believed it was a weapon that targeted concepts. Some thought it could erase islands from existence. Others believed it manipulated the sky, the weather, reality itself. The texts called it the king's judgment, a tool to unmake whatever the king deemed unworthy. Her eyes met his, and the implication was clear. They aren't trying to fight the sovereign. They aren't trying to repair the seal. They're going to use Uranus to erase the epicenter of its awakening. And everything, and everyone, for hundreds of miles around it. A planetary scale buster call, Naruto breathed, the words tasting like poison. Genocide on a scale that made O'Hara look like a footnote. Where is the epicenter? Robin's face tightened. She brought up a new chart, cross-referencing the locations of the Silence incidents with her knowledge of the D-Clan's ancient cartography. The lines converged on a single point in the most treacherous stretch of the New World. An archipelago known as the Tempest's Heart, a region of perpetual violent storms. It's here, she said, pointing. But that's not the worst part, Naruto. The Tempest's Heart is one of the most densely populated non-affiliated regions in the New World. There are dozens of islands there, independent kingdoms, merchant cities. There must be millions of people. Millions of innocent lives, about to be wiped from existence to see over up the world government's millennia-old secret. The same cold, ruthless calculus that had sacrificed Flevance. Naruto stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the deck. He began to pace, a caged tiger of righteous fury. The choice he had been dreading, the one he had been running from his entire life in this world, was now squarely before him. He could follow his orders, stand by as NS were slaughtered to maintain a corrupt and broken status quo. Or he could defy them. He could betray the institution that had given him a home, a purpose, a rank, but one that was built on a foundation of lies and blood. Kageyama's words echoed in his memory. The world government is your true enemy. He stopped pacing. He looked at Robin, at the unwavering trust in her eyes. She wasn't telling him what to do. She had laid out the facts. The choice was his, and in that moment, it became blindingly clear. His justice, the unwavering protective justice he had sworn to uphold, was not about protecting an institution. It was about protecting people. All people, no matter the cost. Get me a secure, open channel, he said to his comms officer, his voice ringing with a cold, absolute authority that tolerated no argument. Broadcast frequency, unencrypted. I want everyone to hear this. The bridge crew froze, looking at him in stunned disbelief. An open, unencrypted broadcast from a Marine Admiral was unthinkable. It was a breach of every protocol. Sir, Isao, his loyal XO, asked, his voice hesitant. What are you doing? Naruto turned to face his crew, the men and women who had followed him into the mouth of hell and back. I'm doing what's right, for the first and possibly the last time. He stood before the broadcast console, took a deep breath, and began to speak. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Admiral of the Marines, commanding officer of the fleet carrier Shinobi. His voice, amplified across the world, was calm, powerful, and resonant. It carried on civilian channels, pirate frequencies, and marine networks alike. In Marineford, Akainu's head snapped up from his desk. On a distant island, the Straw Hats, regrouping after their ordeal, heard it on a stolen radio. In a dark, hidden fortress, Kageyama, nursing his wounds, listened with rapt attention. For years, I have served the world government, Naruto continued. I believed in the justice it claimed to represent. I was wrong. The peace we have lived under is a lie, bought with the blood of the innocent and maintained through a conspiracy of fear. Our world is built upon a cage, and inside that cage is a being of immense power, the sovereign of silence. The world government, our revered leaders, are not our protectors. They are its jailers, and they have just sanctioned the murder of millions to keep their secret safe. He laid it all out. The truth of the Void Century. The sacrifice of Flevance. The shattered anchor at Impel Down. The awakening of the Sovereign. And the impending activation of the ancient weapon Uranus. He held nothing back. I will not be complicit in this genocide, he declared, his voice ringing with the fire of his conviction. I will not stand by while millions are erased to preserve a lie. As of this moment, I, Naruto Uzumaki, renounce my rank as a Marine Admiral. I renounce my allegiance to the world government. My crew and my fleet now serve a higher cause, the protection of the innocent. We will sail to the Tempest's heart. We will stand against the Sovereign. And we will stand against anyone, Marine or otherwise, who tries to sacrifice innocent lives. To the people of the world, I say this: your leaders have failed you. It is time to fight for your own future. He finished. The silence that followed was deafening. He had just declared war on the entire world. He turned to face his crew. Their faces were a mixture of shock, fear, and a dawning, electrifying excitement. He had just made them all traitors, the most wanted men and women on the seas. The choice is yours, Naruto said, his voice softer now. Anyone who wishes to leave may do so at our next port of call. No questions asked, no judgment, but anyone who stays, you will be fighting against the entire world. For the chance at a real future. Kato, the massive fishman, was the first to react. He slammed a giant fist over his heart. You freed me from chains, boss. My life is yours. I'm with you. Aya cocked her rifle with a sharp, metallic click. Sounds like a hell of a lot more fun than writing parking tickets in Sabayati. I'm in. Kenji simply drew his sword an inch from its sheath, the glint of steel a silent, deadly vow. One by one, from the bridge officers to the engineers in the engine room listening on the ship's intercom, a chorus of voices rose up. We're with you, Admiral. They still called him Admiral. The title no longer meant his rank. It meant him. Naruto felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He wasn't alone. He had his family. His moment of triumph was cut short by an incoming transmission, flagged with an encrypted code he recognized with a jolt. It was the frequency of the Ashen Fleet. It was Kageyama. He accepted the call. Holog. Rafik image of Kageyama flickered to life on the war table. The man looked terrible. His face was gaunt, his energy signature weak, the battle at Impel Down having taken a heavy toll. But his eyes burned with the same fanatical intensity. A bold speech, traitor, Kageyama rasped. To think the government's most loyal dog would finally bite the hand that feeds. I'm not doing this for you, Kageyama, Naruto said, his voice cold. I'm doing this for the people you and the government are treating as acceptable losses. Your plan is just as monstrous as theirs. Is it? Kageyama shot back. My plan offers a chance at a final victory. Theirs is a desperate attempt to shove the monster back in its closet for another few centuries, at the cost of millions of lives. My path is brutal, but it leads to a cure. Theirs is a slow, managed death. Which is more monstrous? There's a third option, Naruto said. One where we don't have to choose between two apocalypses. There is no third option. Kageyama roared, a fit of coughing shaking his holographic form. The Sovereign cannot be resealed. Not with the anchors breaking down. It must be destroyed, and I am the only one with the power to do it. You're not, Naruto said simply. You're an extremist with a powerful devil fruit. I have the power of a tailed beast in sage mode. Robin has the knowledge of the void century. Alone, we might fail. But together, the unspoken proposal hung in the air between them. An alliance. A pact with the devil, for the sake of the world. Kageyama stared at him, his mind clearly racing. He was wounded, his forces depleted after the assault on Impel Down. He knew he couldn't face the Sovereign and the full might of the world government at the same time. Naruto, now a rogue element with one of the most powerful warships on the sea, was an unpredictable, but undeniably potent, asset. An alliance, Kageyama sneered, though the scorn lacked its earlier conviction. Between the man who wants to burn the world down and the man who wants to save it. What would that even look like? It looks like this, Naruto said, his gaze locking with Kageyama's. You and your fleet sail with us to the Tempest's heart. We combine our forces, your knowledge of the Sovereign, your awakened powers, we use them to shield our forces, to fight the creature's influence. My power, my team, we become the spearhead. Robin finds the creature's physical core, its weak point. And together, we destroy it before Uranus can fire. And after? Kageyama asked, his eyes narrowing. If we succeed, what then? Do we shake hands and go our separate ways? I will not stop until the Gorosei and their puppet nobles are ashes. After we save the world, we can go back to trying to kill each other, Naruto said bluntly. I don't care. One war at a time. First, we stop the end of the world. Then, we can argue about how to rebuild it. Deal. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the ship's engines and the crackle of the hologram. It was an insane gamble, an alliance between two mortal enemies, united against two separate, world-ending threats. A fleet of traitors against a god and a government. Finally, Kageyama gave a slow, grim nod. You have a deal, Uzumaki. For now, he transmitted a set of coordinates. This is our staging ground. Meet us there in 2 days. But know this, the moment I see you waver, the moment you prioritize your sentimental justice over the necessary action, I will cut you down myself. The transmission ended. Naruto stood in the silence of the war room, the weight of his decision settling upon him. He had just betrayed his oath, become the world's most wanted man, and forged an alliance with a mass murderer. Robin came to his side, her hand finding his. Her touch was a warm, solid anchor in the storm of his choices. An unholy alliance, she murmured, looking at the spot where Kageyama's image had been. The only kind that can win an unholy war, Naruto replied, squeezing her hand. He looked at the map, at the blinking red light that marked the Tempest's heart. Toward that storm, two fleets would now sail as one. A fleet of traitors, rebels, and monsters. The last, best, and only hope for a world on the brink of an eternal, silent dawn. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Dawn Against Silence. The Tempest's heart was aptly named. It was not a storm. It was a permanent, furious state of the ocean. A place where the sky and sea were locked in a perpetual war. Black clouds, thick as mountains, churned in a constant, violent vortex. Lightning spider webbed across the heavens, not in single strikes, but in relentless, strobing sheets that illuminated a hellscape of rogue waves the size of buildings and winds that shrieked like damned souls. Two fleets sailed into this maelstrom. On one side, the Shinobi and its escort frigates, their blue and white marine paint schemes a defiant mockery of their new status as traitors. On the other, the Ashen Fleet, a motley collection of captured warships and pirate vessels, all painted a grim, uniform charcoal gray. They sailed in a tense, fragile alliance, a combined force of enemies united by a single, desperate purpose. Naruto stood on the bridge of the Shinobi, his hands gripping the forward railing. He wore his sage coat, a simple, more practical version of his Admiral's jacket, orange with black flames licking the bottom. The wind tore at him. A physical force that would have thrown a normal man from his feet, but he stood unmovable, a rock in the face of the tempest. His sage mode was active, his senses expanded not just to feel the storm, but to feel the wrongness at its heart. It was a psychic dead zone. A vast, silent scream that consumed thought and emotion. The silence was no longer a creeping phenomenon. Here, at the epicenter of the sovereign's awakening, it was a palpable presence, a miasma of anti-existence. He could feel the wills of his crew being frayed at the edges, their focus wavering. A seed of despair trying to sprout in their hearts. Kageyama. Naruto's voice boomed across the comms, amplified by his chakra. Now, from the deck of Kageyama's flagship, the Revenant, a column of pure, solidified shadow erupted into the sky. It spread out like a vast, dark umbrella, a canopy of darkness that stretched over both fleets. It did not block the rain or the lightning, but it blocked the sovereign's influence. The crushing psychic pressure lessened, the insidious whispers of despair faded. Kageyama, using his awakened power on a scale never before seen, was creating a shield of will, a bastion of his own focused, hateful energy to protect them from the void. Beneath this shield of darkness, the fleets pressed on. In the center of the storm, the clouds parted to reveal a horrifying vista. A cluster of islands, their peaks jagged and black, surrounded a central, unnaturally calm patch of sea. The islands themselves were covered in what looked like gray, misshapen statues. The entire population of the archipelago, millions of people, frozen in place, their wills consumed. Living husks. And in the center of the calm sea, the sovereign was beginning to manifest. It was not a beast of flesh and blood. It was a shimmering, geometric anomaly, a tear in the fabric of reality that absorbed light and sound. It looked like a colossal, multifaceted black crystal, constantly folding in on itself. Its very existence a paradox. From its core, waves of shimmering, colorless energy pulsed outwards, the waves of silence. "Robin, have you found it?" Naruto demanded, his eyes locked on the impossible creature. "I have." Robin's voice came over the intercom, crisp and focused from the shinobi's library. She had connected her senses to his through a link he had established, all owing her to see what his sage mode could perceive. It's not a biological creature. It has no brain, no heart in the conventional sense. But it has a core. A nexus point where its consciousness, its anti-will, is anchored to our world. It's inside the crystal. It's a point of absolute null energy. Your Rasengan, my Haki, they are forms of will, of creation. They are its antithesis. We can hurt it, but we have to hit that precise point. As if sensing their intent, the sovereign reacted. The millions of silent husks on the surrounding islands began to move. They turned in unison, their empty eyes fixed on the approaching fleets. They shambled towards the shorelines, their movements jerky and unnatural. Then, they began to walk into the sea, an army of the will-less, a tide of bodies moving with a single, alien purpose. "They're coming for us," Kato roared from the deck. Simultaneously, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A massive fleet of marine warships, their white sails stark against the black storm clouds. At their head was a vessel that radiated a palpable heat, a ship made of barely contained magma. Akainu had arrived, and behind his fleet, high in the sky, a shimmering distortion was beginning to form. A lens of light, gathering power. Uranus was preparing to fire. "We're caught between a god and a firing squad," Aya cursed, aiming her rifle at the approaching horde. This was the final battlefield. An army of puppets, a conceptual monster, and the full, merciless might of the world government. Then, a third party crashed the apocalypse. From the east, a small ship with a lion's figurehead burst through a wave, its sails emblazoned with a skull in a straw hat. The Thousand Sunny. Following it was the Kuja pirates' vessel, led by Boa Hancock, and the massive, awe-inspiring ship of the Red Hair Pirates, with Shanks himself standing on the prow, his one arm resting on his sword. "Looks like you're having a party and forgot to send an invitation, Naruto." A familiar, joyous voice yelled across the waves. "Monkey D." Luffy stood on the Sunny's head, grinning from ear to ear, his body crackling with the black lightning of advanced hockey. Naruto couldn't help but let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Garp's grandson, the future Pirate King, had arrived. His broadcast had not just rallied his own men, it had summoned every major player who stood against the world government. The battle for the world began. It was not one battle, but three. The first was a naval war. Shanks and his crew, masters of hockey, engaged Akainu's fleet directly. The sky crackled as the conqueror's hockey of two emperors clashed, a silent, concussive wave that made the very air shudder. The Kuja pirates, with their hockey-infused arrows, provided covering fire, while the rest of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, which had arrived in Luffy's wake, slammed into the marine flanks. The second battle was a desperate defense. Naruto's forces and the Ashen Fleet focused their cannons on the approaching horde of will-less husks, trying to thin their numbers. Kato, Sanji, and Jinbei leapt into the water, creating massive whirlpools and shockwaves to disrupt the tide of bodies. Zoro, a demon of blades with his three swords, stood on the deck of the Sunny, his aura a whirlwind of cutting intent, shredding any husks that came too close. The third battle, the most important one, was the assault on the Sovereign itself. "Luffy, Kageyama, with me," Naruto roared. He entered his ultimate form, a perfect fusion of Kurama's power and Sage Mode. He was a blazing golden god, radiating an aura of pure life energy. "We're the only ones who can get close." Kageyama rose from his own ship, his body a swirling vortex of shadow and rage. Luffy shot forward, propelled by a blast of steam from his gear second. His fists coated in the gleaming black of armament hockey. The three of them, the renegade hero, the vengeful revenant, and the future king, became a three-pronged spear aimed at the heart of the void. The Sovereign fought back. It didn't use claws or teeth. It attacked their minds. As they drew closer, waves of concentrated silence washed over them. For Luffy, it was the memory of Ace's death, the crushing despair of his failure. For Kageyama, it was the faces of his family, their slow, painful death in Flevance. For Naruto, it was the loneliness of his childhood, the ostracization, the feeling of being a monster. But they pushed through. Luffy, with his simple, unbreakable will. Kageyama, fueled by a hatred so pure it had become its own form of will. And Naruto, anchored by the love for his wife and the promise he had made to protect the world. Robin, now, guide us in, Naruto yelled, his voice a telepathic command. On the shinobi, Robin stood with her eyes closed, her hands outstretched as if she could touch the battlefield. Sprouting her own eyes on Naruto's back, she saw the sovereign not as a crystal, but as a complex web of null energy. It's moving. The core is shifting. Left, 30 degrees. Then down. It's shielding itself. They moved as one. Kageyama spread his shadows, creating a corridor of darkness that blunted the sovereign's psychic assault. Naruto and Luffy charged through it. Gum gum. King Kong gun. Luffy roared, his arm expanding to the size of a giant's, imbued with the full force of his haki. Sage art. Ultra big ball Rasengan. Naruto bellowed, creating a spinning sphere of natural energy the size of a small meteor. They struck the crystal's surface in unison. The impact was titanic. Cracks, like lightning, spread across the sovereign's paradoxical form. But it held. From the marine fleet, Akainu, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury, saw his chance. Shanks was occupied, and Naruto and Luffy were overextended. Fire! Annihilate them all, he screamed. A volley of magma fists, the size of houses, shot across the battlefield, aimed not at the pirates, but at Naruto and Luffy. But they never reached their target. A wall of sand, vast and shimmering, erupted from the sea, catching the magma and turning it to glass. I owe you one, Straw Hat, a familiar, gravelly voice said. Crocodile, along with the remnants of Baroque W. Orcs and the other escapees from Impel Down freed in the chaos, had arrived. The world was at stake, and old rivalries were meaningless in the face of annihilation. The battle had become a free-for-all, a war of pirates, revolutionaries, and renegade marines against the world government and a creature from outside of reality. It's not enough, Robin's voice cried in Naruto's mind. The core is regenerating. You need to break through in one go. High above, the shimmering lens of Uranus pulsed, reaching its final charge. They had seconds left. Naruto looked at Kageyama. Their eyes met. They both knew what had to be done. There was only one way to generate enough power to shatter the core. Your shadows can't hold back the sovereign's full power, but they can sever its connection to a host, Naruto said. His voice a grim statement of fact. Kageyama understood. This was his one and only path to the redemption he secretly craved. Not just to kill the monster, but to save the world his rage had endangered. My vengeance was for those who died in silence, Kageyama whispered, a strange peace settling on his features. Let my death be the sound that saves the rest. He turned away from them and flew towards the sovereign's core, not as an attacker, but as a sacrifice. He plunged himself into the crystal. His body, made of shadow, began to dissipate, but not before he unleashed his final, ultimate technique. Awakening. Shadow's eclipse. His power didn't explode outward. It imploded. He used his entire being, his devil fruit, his very soul, to create a singularity of darkness right at the sovereign's core. For a breathtaking moment, he fully severed the sovereign's connection to the physical world, creating a window of vulnerability. The creature, for the first time, was truly mortal. In that instant of pure sacrifice, Naruto saw his chance. But he knew his power alone wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed the will of everyone fighting for their lives. Luffy, everyone, give me your will, he yelled, not with his voice, but with his very soul, a call that every haki user on the battlefield could hear. He held up his hand, creating a new Rasengan. And into it, he poured everything. Kurama's chakra, his sage energy, and then, something more. He felt it as a torrent of energy flowing into him. Luffy's indomitable belief, Zoro's ambition, Sanji's passion, Shanks' calm resolve. Even the desperate hope of the faceless marines on his own ship. He was channeling the collective will of the world. The Rasengan in his hand stopped being blue. It shone with a brilliant, pure white light. The color of creation itself. This is our answer, he roared. He thrust the world's will Rasengan into the heart of the sovereign, right where Kageyama had sacrificed himself. There was no sound. There was no explosion. There was only light. A wave of pure, white, creative energy expanded outwards, washing over the battlefield. It didn't destroy. It healed. It restored. The husks on the island stopped, blinked, and looked down at their hands in confusion. Their wills returned. The dark, oppressive sky of the Tempest's heart was scoured clean, revealing a blue sky and a rising sun for the first time in centuries. The sovereign of silence, its core, its very concept, was unmade, overridden by the sheer, undeniable will to exist. High above, the Uranus lens sputtered and died, its target gone. In the stunning, beautiful silence that followed, there was only the sound of the gentle waves. The war was over. The world was saved. Akainu, staring at the scene from the deck of his flagship, his face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage, knew he had lost. Not just the battle, but the war for the world's soul. The great lie was broken. The truth was out. He gave the order, his voice a venomous hiss. Retreat. The marine fleet turned and fled. In the aftermath, a new, strange fleet gathered in the calm waters. Pirates, revolutionaries, traitors, heroes. Naruto, his power exhausted, floated in the water, supported by a laughing Luffy. His eyes sought out the shinobi. He saw her on the deck. Robin. She was looking at him, tears streaming down her face, ASM. Eel of such profound love and relief on her lips that it was brighter than the dawn. He had done it. He had kept his promise. Weeks later, the world was in chaos, but it was a chaos of rebirth. The world government was fractured. Its authority shattered. The Gorosei and their secret king, Amu, were in hiding, now the hunted instead of the hunters. A new age was dawning, an age of freedom and uncertainty. On the deck of the shinobi, anchored off a peaceful, unnamed island, Naruto watched the sunset. He was no longer an admiral. He was a liberator, a hero to some, the world's most wanted man to others. It didn't matter. Robin came and stood beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. Her old crew, the Straw Hats, had visited, a reunion of laughter and tears, before setting off again towards their own dream. The future was unwritten, for them and for the world. So, what now, Mr. Fugitive? She asked, her voice soft. Naruto wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. His loyal crew was celebrating on the island below. His friends were out there, changing the world. And the woman he loved was by his side. Now, he said, a slow, easy smile spreading across his face as he looked at the endless horizon. Now, we live, and we see what happens next. They stood together, the former admiral and the brilliant archaeologist, two souls from different worlds who had found each other and, in doing so, had given their new world a future. They were fugitives. They were family, and for the first time, they were truly free. Chapter 7 End.